There's a quiet moment each of us will inevitably face, a moment when everything we've carefully built falls apart. Maybe you've experienced it already, or perhaps it lingers somewhere in your future. Life brings every person to their knees eventually, shattering plans, dreams, and illusions of control. The question isn't how to avoid these moments, because we can't, but how to move through them, how to rise again stronger, clearer, and wiser than before. What if the greatest strength isn't found in never breaking, but in allowing ourselves to break fully and then courageously rebuilding from those broken pieces? The philosophies of Marcus Aurelius, Friedrich Nietzsche, and Carl Jung teach exactly this. Resilience isn't avoiding hardship but confronting it directly and emerging transformed. Stoicism, championed by Marcus Aurelius, doesn't promise an easy life. Instead, it offers a mindset, a tool set for weathering the storm. It's the quiet, unwavering voice reminding you that while you can't control external events, you can always control your response. It teaches us that mental strength isn't stoic indifference. It's acceptance and intelligent adaptation to whatever life throws your way. Nietzsche takes us even deeper, into a realm of raw truth that hurts before it heals. He believed that real growth happens when we confront life's darkest aspects, tearing away the comfortable lies we tell ourselves. Only then can we reconstruct a stronger, more authentic self. Nietzsche's philosophy isn't gentle, it breaks us down. Yet from that breakdown, we discover an unshakable foundation of inner strength. Carl Jung invites us to journey inward, to face our shadow, the parts of ourselves we avoid and deny. True mental invincibility, he argued, comes from embracing our darkness, integrating the hidden aspects of ourselves rather than fleeing from them. The very struggles we fear most become our greatest teachers, providing the fuel for true inner transformation. Together, these thinkers offer a powerful blueprint for real resilience, not the hollow motivational slogans we've grown tired of, but authentic, tested wisdom. They challenge us not to shy away from life's harsh truths, but to stand before them boldly, using every difficulty as a stepping stone toward genuine strength. This is your invitation, not just to survive hardship, but to become mentally invincible, to embrace life's uncertainty, accept its challenges, and use every obstacle as a path toward your truest, strongest self. What do you do when the person you loved walks away? When the future you planned burns to the ground in a single moment? When the silence in your room is louder than your will to try again? No one teaches you what to do with heartbreak that won't leave, or with failure that rewrites your identity. The world moves on while you're frozen. People tell you to stay strong, but they don't tell you how. They say it'll get better, but they don't sit with you in the meantime. So you're left alone, searching for something, anything that makes the pain make sense. This is where philosophy matters, not as an academic subject, but as a survival guide. Stoicism wasn't born in universities or cozy debates. It was forged in the realest kind of pain: exile, war, slavery, disease. Epictetus had iron chains around his legs when he began to think about freedom. Marcus Aurelius ruled the Roman Empire while burying his children and fighting plagues and betrayal. Seneca wrote his best letters while under the constant threat of execution. These weren't men who escaped suffering. They lived in the middle of it, and from inside that chaos, they built something strong enough to hold on to when everything else falls apart. Stoicism is not about becoming numb. It's not about pretending nothing hurts. It's about building the mental strength to stay standing even when it does. It teaches you to protect your peace, to sharpen your judgment, and to turn inward, not to hide, but to anchor yourself when the world outside becomes too heavy. It doesn't offer easy answers, but it offers clarity. And in the darkest moments of life, clarity is worth more than comfort. When everything breaks down, Stoicism reminds you that while you can't control what's happening, you can control how you respond to it. That may sound small, it's not. It's everything. It means that no matter how hopeless, unfair, or painful the situation is, there is still one power no one can take from you: your choice. How you show up in this moment, what you choose to think, what you choose to say, what you choose to do. That's where your strength lives, not in changing the world, but in refusing to be destroyed by it. And that's a truth most people never hear. Mental strength isn't something you're born with. It's something you build, not during the good times, but especially when life falls apart. When you're sitting in the rubble of your plans, Stoicism hands you a blueprint. Not to rebuild the world exactly as it was, but to rebuild yourself. Wiser, stronger, and more at peace than before. Not by running from the pain, but by learning how to carry it. So if you're hurting right now, this isn't about ignoring it. It's about realizing that the hurt is not the end. It's the beginning of your training, the moment you stop asking, why me, and start asking, how can I endure this well? That's when the shift happens. That's when you stop being a victim of life and start becoming the kind of person no storm can break. Not because you never feel pain, but because you've learned how to face it. When you hear the word philosophy, it's easy to imagine dusty books, abstract arguments, and people sitting in libraries arguing over the meaning of life. But Stoicism didn't come from that world. It wasn't born in lecture halls or among people who had the luxury of free time. It came from people who were tested by life in the most brutal ways possible. People who lost everything: status, safety, even freedom, and still chose to hold on to their inner strength. If you strip Stoicism down to its essence, it's not about ideas, it's about survival. Take Epictetus. He wasn't a noble, a king, or a scholar born into comfort. He was born into slavery in the Roman Empire. He didn't grow up learning philosophy from books. He learned it through pain. He was beaten, silenced, and chained. At one point, it's said that his master twisted his leg until it broke. But Epictetus didn't beg or scream. He looked him in the eye and said calmly, "You're going to break it." And when it snapped, he only said, "I told you so." Years later, when he became a teacher of philosophy, he walked with a limp, not just as a physical reminder, but as a living testament to his endurance. He never forgot his chains, but he also never let them define him. Epictetus said, "You may chain my leg, but not even Zeus can conquer my will." Think about that. A man who had every right to feel powerless was more free on the inside than most emperors were on the outside. He understood something most people never realize. The world can take your job, your health, your reputation, even the people you love, but it can't touch your ability to choose how you respond. That's where your true power lives. Not in avoiding hardship, but in rising above it. Then there's Marcus Aurelius. Unlike Epictetus, Marcus was born into privilege. He was emperor of the most powerful empire in the world. He lived in palaces. He commanded armies. He could have spent his life indulging in luxury and ordering people around. But life didn't care about his title. During his reign, he faced constant war. He lost many of his children. He ruled through one of the worst plagues in Roman history. And despite being surrounded by power, he often felt completely alone. But Marcus didn't run from the pain. He didn't numb himself with distractions. He turned to philosophy as a weapon, and every night he would write to himself, not as an emperor, but as a struggling human being trying to stay strong. Those writings would later become his famous book, Meditations, which wasn't meant to be published. It was his personal journal, a man at the top of the world, privately reminding himself to stay grounded, to stay rational, and to not let the suffering around him consume who he was inside. What's powerful about Marcus is not that he ruled with an iron fist, it's that he ruled with a clear mind and an open heart while carrying more grief than most people could bear. He wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." This wasn't theoretical for him, it was practical. Every day he faced uncertainty, betrayal, and death, and every day he came back to the same principles: control what you can, let go of what you can't, and keep your character intact no matter what happens. This is why Stoicism is different from other philosophies. It wasn't created by people who had easy lives. It wasn't designed for people looking to escape the world. It was built by people who were knee-deep in suffering, who had every reason to give up but didn't. These weren't people who said, just stay positive. They said, life is hard, pain is guaranteed, but you are stronger than you think. And they didn't just say it, they lived it. The truth is, when everything's going well, it's easy to act wise. It's easy to stay calm when nothing's testing you. But Stoicism was made for the days when nothing makes sense, for the moments when your heart is broken and your mind is full of chaos. It was made for those nights when you lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how it all went so wrong. And in those moments, it doesn't offer you false hope. It doesn't promise that things will magically get better. What it gives you is much more honest and much more powerful. It gives you the tools to face reality as it is, to stop running, to stop wishing things were different, and to start building something solid within yourself, something that doesn't break when life does, something that doesn't disappear when people leave or when dreams collapse. That's what Epictetus discovered in slavery. That's what Marcus practiced on the battlefield. And that's what you can begin to build right now, right here, in the middle of your own pain. Because pain doesn't make you weak. It reveals the strength you didn't know you had. Stoicism isn't about pretending everything is fine. It's about standing in the middle of the storm and saying, even if I lose everything, I won't lose myself. And when you get to that point, when you stop needing life to be easy, you become unbreakable. Not because you're numb, but because you've seen what's hard and you kept going anyway. This is the foundation, the mindset carved out by people who suffered deeply and still found a way to live with meaning. It's not about suppressing your emotions, it's about understanding them, navigating them, and not letting them dictate your actions. It's not about being emotionless, it's about being emotionally disciplined. You feel everything, but you don't get swept away by it. You face loss, but you don't let it define your future. You accept what hurts, but you don't let it harden your heart. That's what Stoicism offers. Not comfort, but clarity. Not shortcuts, but strength. And it starts when you realize that no matter where you are, no matter how broken things feel, the one thing that's always within your reach is the ability to choose how you respond. That's your anchor. That's your shield. And when you begin to live by it, not just talk about it, but live it, you don't just survive the pain, you rise through it. And rising through it is the beginning of something new. A life where you're not ruled by fear. A life where strength isn't something you fake, but something you've earned in silence, in struggle, and in solitude. Just like they did. There is a kind of suffering that doesn't come from the situation itself, but from the fight we put up against it. Most of the time, it's not the pain that breaks us. It's our refusal to accept it. We want things to go a certain way. We want people to stay. We want our plans to unfold exactly as we imagine. And when they don't, when life shows up uninvited with a different script, we resist. We clench our fists. We scream inside. We ask, why is this happening to me? but all that resistance only makes the pain louder. Stoicism teaches us something radically different. If you want peace, stop fighting the storm. You can't control the wind, but you can control your sail. This is where the core of Stoic practice begins, the dichotomy of control. It's a simple idea, but one that changes everything. There are two kinds of things in life, those you can control and those you can't. That's it. Most people live as if this isn't true. They waste their energy trying to control what others think of them, what the future holds, or whether bad things will happen. But the Stoics say focus only on what's truly yours, your thoughts, your actions, your choices. Everything else, let it go. It doesn't belong to you. You can't fix it. You can only meet it with grace. Imagine you're caught in the ocean during a storm. The waves are massive, the wind is violent, and your instinct is to fight it. You tense up, you panic, you try to swim against the current with everything you've got. But the more you struggle, the more energy you waste. You start to drown, not because of the storm, but because of the fight. Now imagine something different. Instead of thrashing against the water, you let yourself float. You still feel the waves. You're still in the storm. But now you're working with it, not against it. That's what radical acceptance looks like. It doesn't mean you like the storm. It means you stop pretending you can control it. This is not giving up. It's not passivity. It's wisdom. It's understanding that peace doesn't come from fixing everything around you. It comes from facing reality as it is, not as you wish it were. Pain is part of life. Disappointment, failure, betrayal, loss. These are not glitches in the system. They are the system. You don't get to escape them, but you do get to decide how to respond. And that begins with acceptance. You don't have to accept that something is good, only that it is. If someone breaks your heart, you don't need to tell yourself it was meant to be. You don't need to call the pain a blessing. You just need to say, it happened, I can't undo it, but I can choose what happens next. That simple shift in thinking is what separates suffering from growth. The moment you stop asking, why me, and start saying, now what? You start moving forward. Not because you have everything figured out, but because you've stopped arguing with reality. One of the best ways to practice this mindset is through journaling. Not the kind where you vent endlessly and stay stuck in your emotions, but a clear, focused exercise. Take a sheet of paper, draw a line down the middle. On one side, write down everything that's bothering you, everything you're afraid of, hurt by, stressed about. Be honest, let it all out. Then, on the other side, ask yourself, which of these things are within my control? You'll probably notice that most of them aren't. You can't control if someone comes back. You can't control what people say. You can't control the past. But maybe you can control how you treat yourself, what you focus on today, whether you take one small step instead of sitting in the same place. This practice isn't about magical thinking, it's about clarity. Most of our mental suffering comes from being entangled in things we have no power over. And once you clearly separate what's yours to hold and what isn't, life feels lighter. You stop trying to carry the world on your shoulders. You stop trying to control how people see you. You stop expecting life to follow your script. And from that place, that clean, honest, grounded place, you begin to reclaim your strength. Radical acceptance is not an emotion, it's a decision to be in alignment with what is, even if it hurts. And once you make that decision, something strange happens. The pain doesn't disappear, but it becomes bearable. The fear doesn't vanish, but it no longer controls you. You start to realize that strength isn't pretending to be unaffected. Strength is showing up in the middle of the storm and saying, this is what I've got, and I'll work with it. There's a kind of deep, quiet power that comes from no longer being at war with life, when you accept that people might disappoint you, that your best effort might still fail, that love doesn't always stay, that dreams don't always come true. You stop living in a constant resistance. You start finding peace, not after the storm, but inside it. You realize that pain will always be part of life, but suffering is a choice. And that choice begins with letting go of what was never yours to control. No one escapes the storm, but some people drown in it, while others learn to float. The difference isn't luck, it's mindset. It's the willingness to stop wishing things were different and start working with what's real. When you master that, not once, but over and over, every time life surprises you, you become mentally strong in a way that no outside force can undo. Because you're no longer reacting to life, you're responding to it. And that response is what defines who you are. So start today, even if you're in pain. Especially if you're in pain, ask yourself, what am I holding on to that's not mine to carry? Put it down, then ask, what is mine? Focus on that. It might be as small as taking a breath, making your bed, drinking a glass of water, saying no to one more self-destructive thought. These little things seem insignificant, but they are acts of control, of power, of reclaiming your role in your own life. And when you keep choosing them day after day, storm after storm, you don't just survive. You become someone the storm can't touch, not because it's easy, but because you've learned the most powerful truth of all. You don't need to control the storm, you only need to control yourself inside it. There's a level of strength that goes beyond acceptance. It's one thing to survive the pain, to endure it, to keep going despite everything life throws at you. That alone is a huge victory. But there's another level, one that most people never reach because it sounds impossible. It's the idea that you can actually learn to love what happens to you, even the parts that hurt. This isn't about denial. It's not about pretending everything is great when it's not. It's about transforming your entire relationship with fate, about turning pain into fuel. This idea has a name, amor fati, the love of fate. It sounds strange at first. Why would anyone love what hurts them? Why would anyone be grateful for loss, failure, grief? But that's the whole point. Amor fati is not a weak kind of love. It's not a romantic fantasy. It's a powerful, resilient mindset. It says, I don't just accept this happened, I welcome it, I use it, I make something out of it. Friedrich Nietzsche captured it with a metaphor. A blazing fire makes flame and brightness out of everything that is thrown into it. That's what you are meant to become. Not a fragile flame that flickers when the wind blows, but a fire that grows stronger with each log of pain life throws at you. Marcus Aurelius lived this idea too. Over and over he reminded himself not just to accept events, but to see them as part of the larger design. He wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." To a Stoic, obstacles aren't distractions. They're invitations. Each hardship is a challenge to rise. Every difficulty becomes a test of character. Amor fati means embracing your fate as if you had chosen it, even when it's bitter. Because you understand that the pain isn't working against you, it's shaping you. This doesn't mean you celebrate tragedy. It doesn't mean you smile through betrayal or pretend death doesn't hurt. Amor fati isn't about emotionless living. It's about transformation. It's about looking at what happened, no matter how unfair, how painful, how unwanted, and saying, "This will not break me, I will use this." You take the broken pieces and build something new, something stronger, something that wouldn't exist without the pain. Let's be clear, this is not easy. It's one of the hardest things you'll ever do. It's easy to love the good days, to love the moments when things go your way, but that doesn't make you strong, that makes you lucky. True mental strength is found in how you respond to the days that don't go your way. The days when you lose what you thought you couldn't live without. The days when your heart is so heavy it hurts to breathe. Amor fati is not about feeling good. It's about choosing a response that turns darkness into direction. Think about it this way. Imagine your life as a forge. Every event, every person, every loss, they're raw materials. Amor fati is the fire that melts them down. It doesn't pick and choose what to work with. It takes everything, even the worst parts, and melts them into fuel for your future. Your heartbreak becomes compassion. Your failure becomes wisdom. Your loneliness becomes self-knowledge. It doesn't happen instantly. It takes time. But if you hold the mindset, if you stay in the fire long enough, something new is formed. You're not just recovering, you're being remade. This isn't about fate being fair, it's about you becoming fierce, about refusing to waste your suffering. Because if you don't use it, if you just sit in it, it will rot you from the inside. But if you use it, if you turn it into meaning, into art, into growth, then even your worst day becomes part of your story of strength. You stop asking, why did this happen to me? And start asking, what will I do with this now? One of the most powerful ways to embody amor fati is to reframe your story. Take the hardest moment of your life and ask yourself, what did this force me to learn? What part of me did it wake up? Maybe it taught you patience. Maybe it showed you who your real friends were. Maybe it made you realize how strong you are. Even if it still hurts, even if it always will, that doesn't mean it was meaningless. Amor fati teaches you to choose the meaning, to create value from the things that tried to break you. There's also something deeply calming about this philosophy. So much of our pain comes from wishing things were different. We replay the past. We imagine different outcomes. We hold on to the what-ifs like they're lifelines. But amor fati tells you to stop mourning the life that didn't happen and start living the one that did. The only way forward is through, and if you can walk through your life, not with bitterness but with courage and love, then nothing is wasted. You can even start small. Practice amor fati in everyday frustrations, the traffic jam that delays your plans, the unexpected news that ruins your routine, the person who cancels on you last minute. Instead of complaining, ask, how can I use this? Maybe it gives you time to think. Maybe it teaches you flexibility. Maybe it strengthens your patience. These little acts of mental alchemy prepare you for the bigger storms. The more you train yourself to love your fate in the small moments, the more ready you are when the real pain hits. This mindset also changes your relationship with fear. Most of us are afraid of what might happen, of loss, rejection, failure, death. But if you can learn to love whatever comes, truly love it, then you become fearless, not because nothing hurts, but because nothing can stop your growth. Amor fati turns life into a one-way journey toward meaning. No matter what happens, you move forward, you rise, you transform. That's not blind optimism, that's radical responsibility. It's the highest form of freedom. So when something bad happens, something you didn't ask for, something you wish you could undo, pause, breathe, feel everything, but then ask yourself, what now? How do I make this mine? That question is the turning point. That question is where suffering ends and creation begins. Amor fati doesn't mean you wanted it to happen. It means you're not going to waste the pain. It means you're going to rise through it, brighter, stronger, and more alive than before. Remember, you are the fire. Everything that happens is just fuel. There's a kind of power that doesn't come from loudness, from domination, or from control over others. It comes from stillness, not the stillness of silence, but the stillness of clarity, the kind of inner quiet that keeps you grounded when the world is on fire. This is what the Stoics were really after, not a life without pain, but a mind that remains unshaken in the face of it. When everything outside of you is chaotic, uncertain, or collapsing, the one place that must remain steady is inside of you. That's where your power lives, and that's what the Stoics called your inner fortress. Marcus Aurelius, perhaps the most famous Stoic of all, ruled during one of the darkest times in Roman history. Plagues swept across the empire, killing millions. There were endless wars on the borders, betrayals inside the palace, and deep personal grief in his family life. Despite all that, Marcus never allowed himself to be ruled by panic. He didn't numb himself with pleasure or distractions. Instead, he wrote, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." Think about that. A man who had every reason to feel overwhelmed, political pressure, war, disease, loss, still believed there was a quiet place within, untouched by it all. That's what we all need to find. Not a vacation, not an escape, but a place inside ourselves that we can go to, a place that isn't ruled by anxiety, noise, or fear. That kind of mental refuge doesn't come naturally. In fact, our world is designed to pull us out of it. We're flooded with information, with news, noise, endless updates, and stimulation. Our phones buzz, our screens light up. There's barely a moment of stillness in modern life. So if we want to build an inner fortress, we have to choose to create it. We have to build it on purpose, one brick at a time. The Stoic mindset isn't just about staying calm for the sake of looking strong, it's about preserving your judgment. When you lose your calm, you lose your clarity. You stop thinking. You react emotionally. And that's when people make the worst decisions, not because they're weak, but because they've let fear take the wheel. The Stoics knew that if you want to live well, not just survive, but truly live, you need to learn how to stay clear-headed, especially when things go wrong. You need to protect your inner state like a warrior protects their homeland, because once it's invaded, you're no longer in control. So how do you build that stillness? How do you train yourself to stay grounded when life is anything but peaceful? The Stoics practiced something called premeditatio malorum, or premeditation of evils. It sounds dark, but it's one of the most powerful tools they used. Every morning, they would take a few moments to imagine what might go wrong that day, not to scare themselves, but to prepare their minds. They would picture delays, insults, losses, frustration. They would ask themselves, what if I get sick today? What if someone betrays me? What if I don't get what I want? And then they would calmly remind themselves, if it happens, I will remain composed. I will respond with reason, not rage. This practice trains your mind to expect reality, not fantasy. Most people get crushed by difficulty because they expect things to go smoothly. They assume life will be fair, people will be kind, plans will work out. So when the inevitable disruptions come, they panic. But the Stoic is different. The Stoic is already ready. They've mentally rehearsed the setback. So when it arrives, they face it like an old friend. Not because it's pleasant, but because it's familiar. Another practice that strengthens this inner calm is breath work. This is simple but powerful. Your breath is the only thing that's always with you, no matter where you are, no matter what's happening. And it's also the fastest way to shift your nervous system from chaos to calm. When you're anxious, your breath becomes shallow. Your body thinks you're under attack. But if you take a moment to breathe deeply, slowly, deliberately, you signal to your brain that you are safe. This isn't just psychological, it's biological. Your breath is a lever you can pull to stay grounded in high-stress situations. Try this. Whenever something stressful happens, pause. Don't react, don't say anything. Just breathe in for 4 seconds, hold for 4, exhale for 4. Do it again and again. It won't make the problem disappear, but it will give you a gap, a mental space between stimulus and response. And in that space, you regain control. You get to decide what kind of person you'll be in this moment. That's where stillness begins. Not with changing the outside world, but with changing the way you meet it. There's something incredibly powerful about someone who doesn't flinch in chaos. Someone who doesn't lose their head when everyone else is panicking. That kind of presence is rare. It's magnetic. And it's not because they're cold or distant or disconnected. It's because they've trained themselves to not be ruled by the noise. They've practiced peace like other people practice anger. And when the world shakes, they don't fall. They remain. You don't need a perfect life to be calm. You don't need everything to go your way. What you need is a strong foundation inside of you. A mindset that says, no matter what happens out there, I will guard my peace in here. That doesn't mean you won't feel things. It means you won't be run by them. You'll still feel stress. You'll still get angry. You'll still have fear. But those feelings won't steer your ship. They'll pass through, like wind through a window, and your core will remain unmoved. Stillness isn't the absence of motion. It's the presence of control. It's the choice to stay centered when everything pushes you to the edge. And the more you practice it, with breath work, with negative visualization, with journaling, with self-reflection, the stronger your inner fortress becomes. At first, it's just a small refuge, a quiet moment in the middle of a noisy day, but over time it grows. And one day, you'll face something big, something truly painful, and realize that you're not crumbling like you used to. You're still standing, still thinking, still strong. And that's when you'll understand what the Stoics meant, that peace isn't found in the world, it's built within. It's earned through discipline, through intention, and through practice, through meeting life's chaos not with fear but with stillness. And once you've built that stillness, once you've stepped into it in your darkest moments, you'll never let it go, because you'll know what it's worth. Not just calm for calm's sake, but calm as a weapon, as armor, as a way to move through this world, unshaken, clear, and free. Most people spend their lives avoiding discomfort. We build routines to stay safe. We buy conveniences that make life easier. We avoid confrontation, silence, solitude, hunger, cold, pain, anything that reminds us we are fragile. But what we don't realize is that in avoiding discomfort, we also avoid growth. The Stoics saw this clearly. They believed that if you wait for hardship to find you and you haven't prepared your mind and body in advance, it will break you. But if you train yourself, if you choose small doses of a difficulty every day, then when real suffering comes, it won't destroy you. You will have already become someone who can handle it. The idea is simple: train in peace so you can bleed less in war. In the modern world, most of our suffering isn't physical. We're not fighting for food or surviving in the wilderness. We're battling self-doubt, fear of failure, anxiety, depression, overwhelm, loneliness, but the principle still holds. Mental suffering can be just as brutal as physical pain. The mind is a battlefield, and most people don't train for it. They assume they'll be okay until they're not. Until the breakup happens, until the job is lost, until they wake up one day and realize they don't know who they are anymore. That's why voluntary hardship still matters, because it's not about proving something to others. It's about building inner capacity. So when life gets hard, and it always will, you don't collapse, you rise. Seneca, the Roman Stoic, practiced voluntary hardship regularly. Even though he was wealthy, he would sleep on the floor, wear rough clothing, eat very little, and expose himself to discomfort. Not because he had to, but because he chose to. He believed that by doing this, he was training his mind to remain calm when life took a turn for the worse. He said, Set aside a certain number of days during which you shall be content with the scantiest and cheapest fare, with coarse and rough dress, saying to yourself all the while, "Is this the condition that I feared?" He wanted to prove to himself that the things we're most afraid of, poverty, discomfort, loss, are not as terrifying as they seem when faced directly. You can do the same thing today in your own life. You don't have to sleep on the floor or wear a toga, but you can start choosing discomfort in small, intentional ways. Take a cold shower in the morning, wake up before the sun, go for a long walk in silence without your phone, skip a meal and feel what hunger teaches you. Say no to a pleasure you usually reach for without thinking. These might seem like small acts, but they add up. They're not just physical challenges, they're psychological messages to yourself. I can do hard things. I am stronger than I think. I don't need comfort to be okay. The beauty of voluntary hardship is that it builds something called anti-fragility. Fragile things break when stressed. Resilient things resist stress. But anti-fragile things get stronger because of stress. That's what you want to become. You want to be the kind of person who doesn't just survive pressure, but grows because of it. And that doesn't happen by accident. It happens through training, just like a muscle grows only when it's been pushed past its limits. Your mind becomes stronger when you consistently step outside your comfort zone. But there's something else voluntary hardship does. Something even more valuable than resilience. It reveals what you truly need. So much of our anxiety comes from our attachment to things we think we can't live without. Comfort, attention, luxury, constant entertainment. When we strip those things away, even temporarily, we realize how little we actually need to be okay. We start to appreciate the simple things. We stop chasing more and start building within. That's where real confidence is born, not from what you own or what people think of you, but from knowing that no matter what life takes away, you'll still stand. Let's take an example. Suppose you begin your day with a freezing cold shower. Your body resists. Your mind screams, "This is uncomfortable, turn the water off." But you stay with it. You breathe through the shock. You remind yourself, "This is voluntary, I can do this." By the time you step out, you've already won a mental battle. The rest of your day feels lighter. Because you've already conquered the first struggle. You've proven to yourself before anyone else that you can override your fear of discomfort. That feeling stays with you. It shows up when you're faced with a difficult conversation or a long day of work or a task you want to avoid. You remember, I can do hard things. Now imagine stacking these wins. One cold shower, one skipped meal, one day without checking your phone every 5 minutes, one early morning where you get up when you want to stay in bed. These are not punishments, they are practices. They are deliberate acts of self-discipline that sharpen your mind and thicken your skin. They rewire your nervous system to stay calm under pressure. They build grit, focus, and clarity. And over time, they create a version of you that doesn't run from discomfort but walks toward it, not recklessly but courageously. Voluntary hardship also strips away entitlement. In a world where we're taught to chase ease, luxury, and pleasure at every turn, this kind of training reminds us that we don't deserve comfort, we earn it. And more importantly, we don't need it. We need strength, we need purpose, we need discipline. Those are the traits that carry us through the darkest seasons of life. When things fall apart, it won't be your comfort that saves you. It'll be your preparation, your mindset, your ability to remain composed in chaos because you've chosen to experience difficulty on your own terms. It's also worth mentioning that voluntary hardship connects you to something ancient. Every great culture has a tradition of self-discipline. Monks who fast, warriors who train in isolation, philosophers who retreat into silence. None of this is new. We're just remembering what the modern world has tried to make us forget. That peace is found not in comfort, but in strength. And strength is built by doing the hard thing, even when no one's watching, even when there's no reward but your own growth. So if you want to be mentally strong when life falls apart, don't wait until disaster strikes. Don't wait until heartbreak or loss or failure hits you in the chest. Start training now, while things are calm, while life is stable. because that's when the real work happens. Not when you're forced to be strong, but when you choose to be. And when the storm comes, and it always comes, you'll bleed less. You'll panic less. You'll be ready. Start today. Pick one small hardship and embrace it. Let discomfort be your teacher. Let pain sharpen you. Let resistance reveal your power. Not because life is easy, but because you are becoming someone who no longer needs it to be. When you're stuck in pain, it becomes the only thing you can see. Your mind closes in around it, you obsess over what went wrong, you replay conversations, you analyze mistakes. Everything feels personal, final, and inescapable. In those moments, it's easy to forget the bigger picture. Pain narrows your focus like a tunnel, and you get trapped inside it. That's where one of the most ancient and humbling practices from Stoic philosophy becomes a lifeline. It's called Memento mori. Remember that you must die. At first, it sounds dark, even morbid. Why would anyone want to think about death, especially while struggling? But the Stoics saw it differently. They believed that remembering death wasn't about fear, it was about clarity. Death puts everything in perspective. It shakes you awake. It strips away what doesn't matter. When you remember that your time here is short, suddenly all the little worries shrink. The judgment from others, the failed goals, the arguments, the fears, they lose their power. You realize how much time you've spent worrying about things that have no real weight. You realize how many days you've wasted waiting for the right moment that may never come. Memento mori isn't about being afraid of dying. It's about making sure you're truly living. It's a mental reset that says, this won't last forever, so what are you doing with it? Seneca said, "You act like mortals in all that you fear, and like immortals in all that you desire." We live as if we'll never die when we waste time. We postpone dreams. We avoid hard conversations. We numb ourselves with distractions. But we live as if we might die tomorrow when something scares us. We hesitate, we panic, we shrink. The Stoics flip this. They use the reality of death to fuel their actions, not in a reckless way, but in a focused one. If you remember that today could be your last day, it doesn't make you hopeless. It makes you sharp. You look around and realize, this moment matters. This conversation matters. This breath matters. When you understand this, pain becomes less suffocating, because death doesn't just remind you that life is short, it reminds you that pain is temporary. Everything ends. The heartbreak, the confusion, the regret, none of it is forever. Even your worst day has an expiration date. Memento mori teaches you to stop clinging so tightly, to loosen your grip on things you can't control, to stop acting as if every setback defines your entire life. It doesn't. The clock is always ticking, and that can either terrify you or liberate you. Here's the truth. We spend most of our lives pretending death isn't real. We bury it under entertainment, comfort, goals, distractions. But deep down, we know, and that quiet knowledge haunts us, unless we face it directly. The Stoics believed that when you make peace with death, everything else becomes easier. You stop being paralyzed by fear, you stop being obsessed with control, you stop expecting perfection from yourself and others because you know this is all fleeting, and that knowledge makes you kinder, braver, and more awake. One of the most powerful ways to practice memento mori is to simply sit with the reality of it, daily. Close your eyes and imagine that today is your last. Not in a panicked way, in a clear, quiet, honest way. If you knew you wouldn't wake up tomorrow, how would you spend today? Who would you call? What would you stop putting off? What thoughts would suddenly become irrelevant? This isn't a depressing exercise, it's a liberating one, because it clears the fog. It puts your real priorities in front of you. And when you open your eyes again, the world looks different. The things you were stressed about don't seem so big. The love you've been withholding becomes easier to give. The courage you've been waiting for suddenly arrives. Because what are you waiting for? Another way to apply Memento Mori is to reflect on the lives of others, especially those who are gone, people you admired, people you miss, people who lived full lives or had theirs cut short. Ask yourself, what did they leave behind? What mattered in the end? Was it the money, the achievements, or was it how they made others feel? Was it the strength they showed when things got hard? Was it the simple beauty of showing up with love, presence, and honesty? Death reminds us that legacy is built in moments, not milestones. And the kind of legacy that matters is one of character, not trophies. There's also something comforting about knowing that death is the great equalizer. It humbles everyone. Kings, beggars, geniuses, and fools alike. No one escapes it. So the pressure to be perfect, gone. The pressure to win life before it's over, gone. The only thing that remains is the question: did you live with courage? Did you love with depth? Did you become the person you were meant to be, even when it was hard? If you can say yes to those things, or even begin to move in that direction, then you're already winning. When you think about death regularly, you also become a better decision maker, because your choices become cleaner. You stop chasing things that don't matter. You stop holding grudges. You stop comparing yourself to people on screens. You don't need to impress strangers or cling to empty goals. You realize that what matters most is often simple: peace of mind, strong character, deep relationships, and the courage to be fully alive. Now, not later, because later isn't guaranteed. Memento Mori also helps you forgive, not just others, but yourself. If you're carrying guilt or shame from the past, remembering that death is coming puts it in perspective. You realize how little time you have to keep punishing yourself. You realize how pointless it is to keep replaying what you can't change. If you're alive today, you have a chance to begin again. You can write a different story. You can stop being the person who suffers endlessly and start being the one who transforms the pain. Death doesn't care about your past, but it gives meaning to your present. And strangely, the more you think about death, the more you appreciate life. Ordinary things become extraordinary. A walk in the sun, the sound of someone's voice, the feel of warm water, the sight of trees moving in the wind. These aren't just background noise anymore. They become treasures because you know they won't last forever. Memento Mori sharpens your senses. It turns someday into now. It makes you grateful for things you used to ignore. It makes you fall in love with the world again. Not because it's perfect, but because it's fleeting. So let this truth settle in. You are going to die. Maybe not today, maybe not for a long time, but one day your story will end. The page will turn and there will be no more words. What you do between now and then, that's your power, that's your responsibility, and that's your chance to live in a way that death can't touch. Not by avoiding it, but by using it as a compass, as a lens that helps you see clearly, as a reminder that life is short, pain is temporary, and every second is a gift. Memento Mori doesn't take away fear. It replaces it with focus. It doesn't make life easier, it makes it more meaningful. And if you carry it with you, not as a burden, but as a guide, then no matter what happens, you won't waste your time. You'll live like someone who knows the clock is ticking and who's not afraid. Because when death no longer scares you, life becomes yours again, fully, freely, fiercely. There's one truth that sits at the very core of every Stoic teaching, and it's this: you always have a choice. No matter what happens to you, no matter how cruel, unfair, or chaotic life becomes, there is always one part of you that remains untouched. It's the part that chooses your response, the part that decides what kind of person you will be, even when everything else is falling apart. Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist, expressed this better than almost anyone in history. After losing his family, enduring starvation, beatings, and the constant shadow of death in Nazi concentration camps, he said this: "Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way." That quote is not just beautiful. It's powerful because it was tested in the darkest conditions imaginable. Frankl wasn't writing philosophy from a desk in a warm room. He was writing from inside a nightmare, a place where most people would give up hope, where suffering had no obvious meaning, and where cruelty had no limit. And yet, even there, he realized something profound. If you cannot change the outside world, you still have power over the world within. That small space between what happens and how you respond, that's your freedom, and it can never be taken from you, unless you give it away. This is exactly what the Stoics had been teaching centuries earlier. Epictetus, a man who had once been a slave, put it this way: "It's not things that disturb us, but our judgments about them." What he meant was simple. It's not the event itself that breaks you, it's the meaning you attach to it. You get fired from your job. That's painful, but does it mean you're worthless? Only if you decide that it does. Someone leaves you. That's heartbreaking. But does it mean you'll never love again? Only if you tell yourself that story. The Stoics believed that while you can't control what life brings to your doorstep, you can absolutely control what you make of it. We often forget this. When things go wrong, our first instinct is to blame, to look outside ourselves. If only they hadn't done that to me. If only this hadn't happened. If only life were different. And sometimes those feelings are valid. People can be cruel, life can be unfair. But the Stoics and Frankl both ask us to go deeper, to stop asking, "Why me?" and to start asking, "What now?" Because that question is where your power lives. You don't get to choose your circumstances, but you do get to choose your character. Let's be clear. This doesn't mean you're supposed to smile through your suffering. It doesn't mean pretending that things are okay when they're not. It simply means recognizing that even in your worst moment, there's a decision to be made. Will you become bitter or better? Will you shut down or step up? Will you surrender your mind to despair? Or will you hold on to your dignity, even if everything else is gone? That decision might seem small, but it's everything. Because that's how you build your identity, not in perfect moments, but in painful ones. Every time you choose to respond with courage instead of self-pity, with integrity instead of resentment, with effort instead of excuses, you become stronger. Not just temporarily, but permanently. You're rewiring your mind. You're carving out a version of yourself that no pain can erase. And the more often you make that choice, the more unshakable you become. It's also important to understand that choosing your response doesn't mean choosing your emotions. You can't always choose what you feel. Grief, anger, sadness, they come and go like weather. And that's okay. You don't need to suppress them. The Stoics didn't teach emotional numbness. They taught emotional discipline. Feel what you feel. Let the emotion rise, but then choose how you respond. Don't act out of impulse. Don't let the emotion own you. Be the observer. Let the feeling pass, and then respond like the person you want to become. This gap between stimulus and response is where true freedom begins. You get cut off in traffic. Do you scream or do you breathe? You get rejected. Do you spiral into self-hate or do you accept and move on? Someone disrespects you. Do you react with vengeance or with composure? These moments seem small, but they are training your mind every day. Every choice you make, no matter how minor, is a vote for the kind of person you are becoming. And sometimes The choice is simply to keep going when nothing makes sense, when it feels like everything's falling apart, when you want to give up. Choosing to not quit is a response to choosing to show up for yourself, to take the next step, even if it's small, even if it's shaky, is one of the most powerful things you can do. Because you're proving to yourself, I am not a victim. I am not just a product of my circumstances. I am someone who chooses my path, even when it's hard. This mindset changes everything. It turns suffering into strength, it turns chaos into clarity, and it makes you nearly impossible to break. Not because you avoid pain, but because you know how to meet it with presence, with awareness, with choice. If you're struggling right now, if life feels heavy and unfair, remind yourself of this. The pain may not be your fault, but your response is still your responsibility. You can choose to let it define you, or you can choose to define yourself through it. You can choose to become bitter or become wise. You can choose to collapse or to rise. And that choice, that's the one thing no one can take from you. So ask yourself, in this moment, what kind of person do I want to be? Not in theory, not in fantasy, but here now in the middle of this situation, with all its messiness and pain. Who do I want to become? And what small choice can I make today that reflects that? Because that's all it takes. One small choice made again and again. The choice to be calm when it would be easier to lash out. The choice to forgive when you want revenge. The choice to try one more time when everything inside you wants to quit. These are not dramatic acts, but they are deeply powerful. And over time, they build something unshakable inside you. Something no one can give you, and something no one can ever take away. That is your freedom, that is your strength, that is your power, and it has always been yours. When life falls apart, it can feel like you're the only one going through it, like everyone else has it figured out while you're quietly breaking inside. But the truth is, every person you've ever met has carried pain. Everyone has faced moments that felt like the end, moments when the weight was too much, when the future was too dark, and the silence too loud. You are not alone in your suffering, and more importantly, your suffering does not make you weak. It makes you human. The Stoics never promised a life without pain. They never sold comfort or easy answers. What they offered was something far more powerful, the strength to stand tall inside the storm, to feel everything and still remain rooted, to experience heartbreak, loss, failure, confusion, and to not be destroyed by it. That's what real strength is. Not the absence of emotion, but the courage to face it without losing yourself. You now know the tools: radical acceptance, the art of letting go of what you can't control, amor fati, the mindset that transforms pain into power, inner stillness, the fortress you build through breath, reflection, and presence, voluntary hardship, the training ground for life's chaos, memento mori, the reminder that time is short and every moment is a chance to live deeper. And above all, choice, the one freedom that is always yours, no matter how broken the world around you becomes. You will fall, you will break, you will lose people, lose faith, lose direction. That's not a failure, that's life. But you will also rise, you will rebuild, you will become someone you never imagined you could be. Not despite the pain, but because of it. Every scar will become part of your story, every setback, a page in your growth. And every time you choose to keep going, even when it hurts, you are becoming someone stronger, someone wiser, someone unshakable. So when life falls apart, don't search for escape, search for meaning, search for strength. Return to these principles, return to yourself, breathe, reflect, choose, and above all, stand tall. Let this be your reminder, now and whenever you need it. Save this video. Come back when it's hard, when you've lost something, when you're afraid, when you're on the edge. Watch it again, let it guide you back to yourself, and never forget, you are stronger than you think. This book is not a guide, not a manifesto, and certainly not a self-help manual in the usual sense. Thus Spoke Zarathustra is a fire. It doesn't try to make you feel good about yourself. It tries to burn away everything false, shallow, and borrowed in you, everything inherited, everything unearned. Nietzsche did not write this book for the average person, or even for the average philosopher. He wrote, "This book belongs to the rarest of the rare." And he meant it. He didn't believe most people could understand this book, not because it's written in flowery language or packed with academic jargon, but because it requires something very few people are willing to do: the courage to face their own inner abyss. When Nietzsche wrote Thus Spoke Zarathustra, he was trying to create something that would reach beyond the typical way people thought about philosophy. Instead of offering abstract arguments, he created a character, Zarathustra, and gave him a voice like a prophet, a poet, a madman, and a visionary. Zarathustra speaks in parables and riddles with rhythms that resemble scripture more than science, and this was on purpose. Nietzsche wanted to deliver ideas so powerful they couldn't be explained, only felt, wrestled with, and lived through. This is a book that must be experienced as much as understood. It demands that you bring your entire self to it, and in return, it offers transformation, but only if you're willing to suffer for it. There are three major ideas that repeat and evolve throughout this book: self-overcoming, the death of God, and eternal recurrence. They aren't presented as conclusions, but as challenges. They're not meant to be agreed with. They're meant to shake your foundations and force you to answer the question, who are you when there's no one left to tell you who to be? The idea of self-overcoming is one of Nietzsche's most important concepts. It's the belief that growth, real growth, only comes through a process of internal struggle, not through comfort or positivity, but through inner rebellion. He believed that human beings are not fixed. We are not finished. Instead, we are creatures in the middle of a transformation. Man is a bridge, Zarathustra says, a rope stretched between the beast and the Übermensch, the higher human being. That bridge must be crossed, not through education or obedience, but through fire, through conflict, solitude, and the destruction of everything false within us. You cannot become who you truly are unless you are first willing to kill who you were told to be. The death of God, famously declared early in Zarathustra's journey, is often misunderstood. Nietzsche was not just making a theological point. He was describing the collapse of the moral and metaphysical foundations of Western civilization. The idea of God, whether you believe in one or not, represented something deeper: the belief in a fixed, universal truth that tells us how to live and what to value. But Nietzsche saw that this belief was dying. Science, modernity, and rationalism had eroded it, and now we were left floating in a world with no guaranteed purpose, no divine script. Most people hadn't realized it yet, but the ground beneath their feet was already gone. And this, Nietzsche believed, would lead not to liberation, but to nihilism, a spiritual sickness where nothing feels meaningful and everything becomes shallow, passive, and safe. And yet, Nietzsche didn't write this book to lament the death of meaning. He wrote it to provoke the creation of new meaning, and the final test of whether you've truly accepted that challenge comes in the idea of eternal recurrence. one of the most brutal, beautiful thought experiments in all philosophy. Imagine living your life again and again, exactly the same, for eternity. Every pain, every regret, every hour wasted or lived with full intensity, you relive it endlessly. If that thought horrifies you, you're not living right. If you can embrace it with joy, then you've created a life worth living. That's the standard Zarathustra holds you to. Not moral purity, not success, but eternal affirmation. Saying yes to all of it, not just the good parts. So this book is not just about philosophy, it's about existence. It doesn't give you answers, it burns away your illusions and then dares you to build something new from the ashes, something personal, something real. It's not written for everyone, but if you're still listening, if something in you hungers for that fire, then maybe it was written for you. After 10 years of silence, solitude, and meditation in the mountains, Zarathustra decides it is time to descend. This descent is both literal and symbolic. Zarathustra walks down from the high peaks where he has lived in isolation, but he is also descending into the chaos, confusion, and decay of human society. His goal is not to become a teacher in the traditional sense, nor to win admiration. He's not coming down with commandments or holy laws. He comes to plant a seed, a dangerous idea, in the hearts of those willing to listen. What he brings with him is not comfort, but a new challenge, one so radical that even he doubts whether anyone is ready for it. Zarathustra's first words are not philosophical arguments. They are metaphors, poems, and parables. He speaks in riddles because the truths he brings are not easily swallowed. They are meant to disrupt, to disturb, to shake people out of their slumber. His time in solitude was not wasted. It was a necessary withdrawal from the world, a preparation for the task of reshaping values. He has gone into the wilderness to free himself from everything borrowed: morality, religion, customs, even language. When he returns, it is with a new vision of what humanity could become, but also a clear understanding of how far it still has to go. In Prologue 2, Zarathustra delivers one of Nietzsche's most infamous lines: "God is dead, God remains dead, and we have killed him." This is not a declaration of atheism in the simple sense. Nietzsche is not concerned with the existence of a deity. What he's saying is far more radical. The idea of God as the center of morality, meaning, and truth no longer holds the same power it once did. Science, rationalism, and secular culture have eroded the foundations of belief. But instead of celebrating this, Nietzsche warns of what comes next: a cultural and spiritual collapse. The world has lost its grounding. Without the idea of God, everything becomes unmoored. Values lose their authority, purpose becomes uncertain, and people become vulnerable to emptiness. The danger is not that people no longer believe in God, but that they will replace God with nothing. This void, this loss of meaning, is what gives rise to the last man. In Prologue 5, Zarathustra presents this figure as the embodiment of modern mediocrity. The last man is not evil, he is not dangerous, he is something worse: comfortable, shallow, and unimaginative. He wants safety above all else. He avoids pain, challenge, and risk. He consumes pleasure in small doses, not out of joy, but to avoid discomfort. "We have invented happiness," say the last men, and they blink. This blinking, this image of passive, mindless existence, captures what Nietzsche saw as the real threat to the human spirit. Not war, not violence, but spiritual laziness. The last man wants a world where everything is predictable, where nothing hurts, and therefore where nothing truly matters. But Nietzsche does not leave us with this bleak picture alone. Zarathustra has come to deliver an alternative, the vision of the Übermensch, or Overman. This is the higher type of human being, the one who does not rely on inherited beliefs or passive comfort. The Übermensch is someone who creates their own values, someone who lives with purpose not handed down from above, but born from within. In Prologue 4, Zarathustra says, "Man is a rope stretched between the animal and the Übermensch, a rope over an abyss." This is a striking metaphor. Humanity is not a finished product. We are not the end goal. We are a transition, a process, a bridge. And crossing that bridge requires danger, balance, and the constant risk of falling. The abyss beneath the rope is nihilism, the belief that life has no meaning, that nothing matters. The animal on one end of the rope represents instinct, survival, and nature. The Übermensch on the other side represents the possibility of a new kind of existence, one that is stronger, freer, and more creative. But there is no guarantee that the rope will be crossed. In fact, most people will not even try. They will turn away, step back, and live like the last man, because it is easier. Zarathustra tries to deliver this message to the people, but they laugh at him. He speaks to them of the Übermensch, but they misunderstand and mock him. They are not ready. This rejection is an important moment. It shows that truth, especially transformative truth, is rarely welcomed by the crowd. The herd prefers comfort to confrontation. Zarathustra must realize that his words are seeds planted in hard soil. They may take years to grow and they may be trampled before they even sprout. This theme of being rejected, of speaking truth into a deaf world, repeats throughout the book. Zarathustra is not a savior. He is a voice crying out in a world that no longer believes in voices. He is both ahead of his time and out of place in it. He knows that only a few will understand him. "I am not the mouth for these ears," he says, but still he speaks, still he descends, because the message matters more than the applause. The first part of Zarathustra's journey, then, is about this act of descent, this courageous decision to return to a world that has lost its way, to challenge it with a new vision. It's also about setting the stage for the core conflict of the book, the tension between what humanity is and what it could become. The rope, the abyss, the mocking crowd, all of these form the environment in which the idea of self-overcoming must take root. Nietzsche is not offering a roadmap. He is offering a mirror, and asking whether you are willing to look into it and see not what you are, but what you must become. The prologue ends with a kind of resignation. Zarathustra sees that the people are not ready. He leaves the marketplace and decides to seek disciples, not to build a school or a church, but to find even a few individuals who are willing to walk the path of transformation. The story is just beginning, but already the tone is set. The way forward is not through society, but through the individual. Not through collective belief, but through personal strength. And that strength begins with the willingness to abandon everything false and step out over the abyss, into the unknown. After Zarathustra's descent from the mountains and his failed attempt to awaken the crowd to the idea of the Übermensch, he turns inward again, but this time not into solitude, but into teaching. His journey shifts from confronting society at large to seeking those few individuals who might be capable of transformation. He knows now that the path to becoming who you are cannot be walked by the many. It can only be walked by the rare few. The ones willing to bear the weight of existence, destroy what they were taught to believe, and rebuild themselves from nothing. This process, painful, difficult, and deeply personal, is at the heart of the second section of Thus Spoke Zarathustra. Here, Nietzsche introduces some of the book's most powerful metaphors and teachings, beginning with one of the most important of all, the three metamorphoses of the spirit. Zarathustra describes the evolution a person must undergo to transform their spirit. The journey begins not with freedom or creativity, but with burden, the stage of the camel. The camel is the creature that says yes to responsibility. It kneels to take on heavy loads. It accepts the values of its culture, its religion, its teachers. It suffers and sacrifices. At this stage, we are obedient. We do what we're told. We carry ideals that were handed down to us. Be good, be moral, be humble, be selfless. There is a kind of nobility in this stage, but also a deep danger. Because the camel accepts values uncritically, it confuses obedience with virtue. It does not yet think for itself. But Nietzsche does not reject the camel completely. He sees it as a necessary beginning. Before we can reject old values, we must first carry them. We must feel their weight. We must live under them long enough to recognize what they cost us. Only then can we move to the next stage, the stage of the lion. The lion is the rebel. It says no, not to life, but to the values that were imposed on it. The lion refuses to be ruled. It fights against tradition, against duty, against the inherited morality that kept it tied down. This stage is fiery, bold, and full of strength. But even the lion, Nietzsche says, cannot yet create. It is strong enough to destroy old values, but it lacks the innocence and playfulness needed to invent new ones. And that brings us to the final stage, the child. The child represents a return to innocence, but not ignorance. It is a symbol of creation, play, and fresh beginnings. The child is not bound by the past. It does not rebel for the sake of rebellion. It simply plays, imagines, and affirms life with a joyful yes. This is the spirit capable of creating new values, of becoming truly free. To create new values that even the lion cannot do, but the child is needed for that, Zarathustra says. The child is the final transformation. The self that no longer lives in reaction to what came before, but lives out of its own inner truth. This idea of transformation, of spiritual evolution, is one of Nietzsche's most important contributions. It's not enough to obey, and it's not enough to rebel. The real task is to move beyond both, to create. But this process is not easy. It is not given to us. It must be earned through struggle, and most people, Nietzsche believes, never make it past the camel stage. They carry their burdens until they break, or they rebel briefly and then return to the safety of obedience. Very few reach the point of becoming the child, of living with creative freedom. In the chapters that follow, Nietzsche deepens this theme by turning his attention to the forces that prevent people from transforming. In On the Afterworldly, he criticizes religion, not simply for believing in a god, but for promoting the idea that life itself is something to be escaped. Many religions, Nietzsche argues, teach that true reality lies beyond this world, in a heaven or afterlife. This makes people resent the physical world, their bodies, their instincts. It turns them into what Nietzsche calls the afterworldly, people who despise life and long for escape. Zarathustra sees this as a form of spiritual sickness. It denies the value of existence in favor of a fantasy, and in doing so, it robs people of the will to live deeply, courageously, and creatively. Nietzsche's rejection of this life-denying attitude is not just intellectual, it is emotional, even personal. He is angry at how many people have been taught to feel shame about their desires, their impulses, their bodies. In On the Despisers of the Body, he writes, "Behind your thoughts and feelings, my brother, there stands a mighty ruler, the body." This is a direct attack on the dualism of body and mind, the idea inherited from Plato and Christianity that the soul is higher than the flesh. Nietzsche flips this completely. He argues that the body is not something we are trapped in. It is what we are. Our instincts, our emotions, our drive, these are not enemies to be controlled. They are the source of our wisdom. The spirit, he says, is simply a function of the body. To despise the body is to cut yourself off from your own power. This idea is incredibly liberating, but also incredibly dangerous, because it means that you must take full responsibility for yourself. You cannot rely on heaven or society or tradition to tell you how to live. You must look inward. You must listen to your body, your instincts, your deepest drives, and then shape your life around them. And that leads directly into the final chapter of this section, On the Way of the Creator. Here, Zarathustra speaks of the individual not as a follower or even a rebel, but as a creator. This is the highest ideal in Nietzsche's philosophy, the human being as a force of creation, not someone who copies values, but someone who invents them. The creator does not ask for permission, he does not look for approval, he does not try to save the world or fix humanity, he simply brings new meaning into existence through the act of living. But this path is lonely. The creator seeks companions, Zarathustra says, not corpses. He does not want disciples. He wants fellow creators, individuals strong enough to walk their own path, not cling to his. The path of the creator is filled with uncertainty, with resistance, with doubt. But Nietzsche believes it is the only path worthy of a fully developed human being. The creator must live in the present, grounded in the body, free from illusions about heaven or morality. He must affirm life, not just the beautiful parts, but the painful ones. And above all, he must be willing to create his own meaning, even if it means walking alone. Taken together, these chapters, the three metamorphoses, the critique of religion, the defense of the body, and the call to become a creator, form the foundation of everything that follows in the book. They are not easy teachings. They ask you to abandon safety, tradition, and comfort. They ask you to question everything you were taught. But in return, they offer something extraordinary. The possibility of becoming something more than you are, not through salvation, not through submission, but through creation, through the courage to look into yourself and to begin again. In part 2 of Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Nietzsche takes the reader deeper into the personal cost of transformation. The metaphor of the rope from the prologue, the idea that man is suspended between animal and Übermensch, becomes more real here. Because now Zarathustra is not only proclaiming bold ideas to the world, but wrestling with the loneliness, the frustration, and the psychological weight that comes with having stepped beyond the crowd. This section is about the inner landscape of someone who has rejected conventional life and is trying to build something new from scratch. It's not glamorous, it's not romantic, it's painful, isolating, and full of spiritual fire. Zarathustra begins by turning his attention to the so-called wise men of society, philosophers, teachers, religious leaders. In the chapter on the famous wise men, he dismantles their authority. These are the people who claim to possess wisdom, who supposedly teach others how to live. But Zarathustra sees them differently. He sees them as clinging to outdated systems of thought, afraid of new ideas, stuck in the comfort of tradition. They are clever, yes, but not courageous. They love rules more than life. Nietzsche argues that these so-called sages have turned philosophy into obedience. They disguise fear as virtue, weakness as humility. Rather than helping people think for themselves, they encourage dependence. Their wisdom is hollow, based not on experience or personal strength, but on the desperate need to feel superior while remaining safe. This is one of Nietzsche's most consistent criticisms, that morality, as commonly taught, is not actually moral. It's a mask for weakness. Instead of teaching people how to grow stronger, Conventional wisdom teaches them how to feel righteous while avoiding the struggle required for real transformation. Zarathustra wants nothing to do with this kind of wisdom. He wants people to suffer honestly, to live courageously, and to question everything, even the things that have been called good for centuries. But this path, the path of truth, power, and independence, comes with a cost. In the chapter on the Night Song, Zarathustra speaks of a deep spiritual isolation. He says, "I am a forest and a night of dark trees, but he who is not afraid of my darkness will find banks full of roses under my cypresses." Here, Nietzsche shows that the person who tries to live beyond the herd, who walks the path of self-overcoming, will often be met not with applause but with silence. The higher your vision, the fewer people will understand it. And this leads to a kind of loneliness that is not just social, it's existential. Zarathustra compares himself to the moon, shining in a dark sky, singing to a world that does not respond. His song is full of longing, of pain, and of a beauty that almost no one is ready to hear. This theme continues in On the Dancing Song, but now there's a shift. The pain of isolation does not lead Zarathustra to despair, it leads him to movement. Dancing becomes a metaphor for vitality, for the refusal to remain heavy or bitter. Even when alone, even when misunderstood, Zarathustra dances. But the soul of the dancer is in his own knees, he says. This means that joy does not depend on the approval of others. It comes from within. The dancer is someone who moves with grace despite the weight of the world, who refuses to be flattened by grief or loneliness. Dancing is not escape, it is resistance. It is saying yes to life, even when life is hard. It is a sign of inner power. And this is where Nietzsche begins to articulate one of his most important ideas, the will to power. In On the Tarantulas, Zarathustra attacks the morality of resentment, especially the kind promoted by those who appear to be champions of the oppressed. The tarantulas represent people who demand equality not because they value justice, but because they hate the strong. Their morality is driven not by love, but by revenge. They use the language of fairness to justify their desire to pull everyone down to their level. Zarathustra says, "The bite of conscience teaches man to bite." In other words, people who feel weak or ashamed often project that pain onto others. They moralize their hatred. Nietzsche is not saying that injustice doesn't exist. He's saying that many so-called moral crusades are really just disguises for bitterness and the desire for control. This is a hard teaching because it asks us to look at our motives honestly. Do we seek truth or do we seek power over others? Do we help the weak because we care or because we want to feel superior? Nietzsche believed that many of the moral ideals of society were based on fear and envy, not strength and courage. Zarathustra calls on us to go beyond this reactive morality, to live not out of resentment, but out of creative power. That power is explored further in On Self-Overcoming. Here, Nietzsche fully introduces the will to power as the deepest force in human nature. What is good? Zarathustra asks. All that heightens the feeling of power, the will to power, power itself in man. And what is bad? All that proceeds from weakness. This is not a call to domination. Nietzsche's idea of power is not about controlling others, it's about mastering oneself. The will to power is the drive to grow, to challenge oneself, to overcome limitations. It is the force behind all creativity, all ambition, all strength, and it is constantly at war with the forces of decay, comfort, and stagnation. Self-overcoming, then, is not a one-time event, it's a way of life. It means constantly questioning your own beliefs, your own habits, your own desires. It means embracing conflict and struggle, not because you enjoy pain, but because you understand that growth is impossible without it. You must burn in your own fire, Zarathustra says. You must be willing to let go of what no longer serves you, even if it once gave you meaning. You must be ruthless with yourself, not to punish yourself, but to free yourself. What Nietzsche is doing in this part of the book is showing the internal side of the transformation he described earlier. The first part dealt with metaphors: camels, lions, children. This part deals with the emotional and psychological reality of living those transformations. It's about the cost of freedom, the pain of solitude, the difference between false strength and true strength, and the constant temptation to fall back into comfort, resentment, or conformity. But it's also about the beauty that can emerge from that struggle, the dance, the song, the fire. Zarathustra may be alone, but he is not broken. He is singing in the night, he is still moving, he is still burning. And that, Nietzsche suggests, is the mark of someone who is becoming who they truly are. Not someone who has arrived, but someone who is willing to keep going, no matter how dark the path gets. In the second half of part 2 of Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Nietzsche shifts the focus from the fight against external forces, against false morality, conformity, and shallow wisdom, to an even deeper and more personal struggle, the battle within the self. This is where the real test begins. It's no longer enough to reject what's outside. Now Zarathustra must deal with what's inside, his past, his fears, and his doubts. This part of the book introduces one of Nietzsche's most powerful and life-changing ideas: redemption not through guilt, but through affirmation. It also presents a pivotal moment in Zarathustra's inner development, a moment of silence, fear, and painful truth. On Redemption, Zarathustra tackles the problem of regret and suffering in a radical new way. Most religious or moral systems tell us that redemption, or healing, comes through confession, repentance, or forgiveness. You admit your sins, you feel guilt, you apologize, and in that process, you're somehow made clean. But Nietzsche rejects this model entirely. To him, guilt is a form of weakness. It keeps us chained to the past, it focuses on what we cannot change, and in doing so, it saps our strength. Instead, he offers a new definition of redemption: the ability to affirm your life so completely that you would choose it exactly as it is again. This is not easy. It means embracing every mistake, every loss, every painful moment, not with bitterness, but with a kind of fierce acceptance. In one of the most important lines in the entire book, Zarathustra says, "To redeem the past and to transform every it was into thus I willed it, that alone do I call redemption." This is the voice of someone who refuses to be a victim, someone who takes full ownership of their life, even the parts they didn't choose. It's not about pretending that everything was good, it's about saying, "This is mine, I accept it, I own it, I will make something powerful out of it." This is a key part of Nietzsche's concept of the will to power. Not the desire to control others, but the inner force that pushes us to overcome, to create, to shape ourselves and our lives. When you can take your past with all its weight and darkness and still affirm it, when you can say yes to your life as a whole, that is true strength. That is the highest form of power. But Nietzsche also knows that this path is terrifying. In the chapter on human prudence, he speaks to the part of us that wants to play it safe. Prudence, caution, moderation, careful planning is often seen as a virtue, but Zarathustra mocks it. He calls it a clever cowardice. People who are too cautious, too calculating, never truly live. They avoid danger, yes, but they also avoid greatness. True life, Nietzsche says, requires risk. It requires throwing yourself into the unknown. It means making decisions that aren't always rational, but that are driven by the deeper forces of the soul. He writes, "Too much prudence is a kind of death. And he's right. When we overthink everything, when we try to control every outcome, we lose the wild, creative energy that gives life its meaning. Zarathustra urges us to break free from this fear-driven caution, to stop clinging to safety, and to trust the instincts and desires that call us forward, even when the path is unclear. All of this, the rejection of guilt, the call to affirm the past, the challenge to step beyond caution, leads to a powerful turning point in The Stillest Hour. This chapter is not about teaching others. It's about confronting yourself. Zarathustra finds himself alone, and in that silence he hears a voice, his own inner truth speaking to him. But what it says is not comforting. It accuses him. It tells him that he has not been honest, that he has held back, that he has not yet spoken the deepest, most dangerous truths he carries. This is not an external enemy. This is not the crowd that laughed at him or the shallow thinkers he has mocked. This is Zarathustra's own fear, his own hesitation, and the voice says essentially, "You've come this far, but you're still afraid. You still want to be liked. You still want disciples. You have not yet gone far enough." The confrontation in The Stillest Hour is brutal, not because of violence, but because of its truth. Zarathustra must face the reality that even he, the prophet of transformation, is still clinging to comfort. He has not yet fully embraced his calling. He has not yet spoken with the absolute honesty that true creation demands. And now there is no turning back. The final lines of the chapter are among the most powerful in the entire book. The voice says, "Now I go alone, my disciples. You too go now, and alone. Thus I want it." Zarathustra realizes that the time for teaching is over. The time for being followed is over. The next stage of his journey must be walked alone, just as it must be for anyone who seeks to become more than what they were. The crowd cannot help you. Even your disciples, the ones who admire you, who listen to your words, can become a trap, because as long as you are trying to please them, you are not truly free. This is the final test of the will to power. Can you break even from those who look up to you? Can you let go of the need to be understood, to be liked, to be followed? Can you walk your path completely alone, guided only by your inner fire? Nietzsche is not glorifying isolation for its own sake. He's not saying that being alone is a virtue. What he's saying is that true transformation cannot happen unless you are willing to risk total independence. Unless you are willing to stop asking for permission, even from your past self. The stillest hour is the moment when the noise of the world fades and you are left face to face with what you know you must do and what you are most afraid to do. This moment marks a kind of spiritual noon in Zarathustra's life. It's the point where everything becomes clear and there's no going back. The light is harsh, the shadows are sharp, but the path is visible. From this point on, there is only forward, only the climb, only the long road toward becoming who you truly are, not in theory, but in action. So if you take one thing from this part of the book, let it be this. Redemption is not about forgiveness. It's about transformation. Power is not about controlling others. It's about mastering yourself. And the truth, the deepest truth, is not something you can share too soon. It must be earned, suffered for, and finally spoken when you are ready to walk alone. This is the turning point. This is where Zarathustra stops being a teacher and starts becoming something else, something harder, lonelier, and infinitely more real. This is where the fire gets hotter and the journey gets steeper, and from here everything that follows will demand more than just thought. It will demand action. It will demand you. In part 3 of Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Nietzsche introduces one of the most demanding and profound ideas in all of philosophy, the concept of eternal recurrence, sometimes called the eternal return. It is not presented as a dogma, not as something to believe in, but as a psychological experiment, a question meant to pierce through your daily habits, your self-deceptions, and the way you live your life. The idea is introduced slowly, surrounded by poetic imagery and layers of mystery, particularly in the chapters The Wanderer, The Vision and the Riddle, On Involuntary Bliss, and Before Sunrise. This is the moment when Zarathustra and the reader must look directly into the abyss and ask, what if this moment returned to you forever? Would you still choose it? The idea is stated most clearly in The Vision and the Riddle. Zarathustra tells the story of a moment that comes upon him, alone on a mountain path, when he meets a dwarf, a symbolic figure who represents cleverness, reason, and perhaps the voice of doubt or intellect. Together, they approach a gate marked Moment. From this point stretches two roads, one into the past and one into the future. But Zarathustra's insight is that these two paths, though appearing separate, are in fact part of a circle. He says, this long lane behind us, it goes on, it must go on, and if it goes on, it returns. And from this insight arises the terrifying, magnificent idea of eternal recurrence. He imagines that one day a demon may come to you in your loneliest hour and whisper, this life as you now live it and have lived it, you will have to live once more and innumerable times more, and there will be nothing new in it, but every pain and every joy must return to you, all in the same sequence. The question Nietzsche poses is not about whether this is scientifically or cosmologically true. It is about how you would respond if it were. Would you curse the demon and collapse under the weight of your life being repeated endlessly? Or would you say, you are a god, and never have I heard anything more divine? This idea is meant to test the quality of your life, your choices, your values. It demands that you reflect on whether you are living in a way that you would be willing to repeat, not once, but forever. Every small decision, every wasted hour, every regret, and every triumph. Would you endure it again? Could you love your fate, not just accept it, but embrace it so completely that you would welcome its eternal return? This is where Nietzsche's concept of amor fati, the love of fate, becomes essential. Amor fati is the attitude of someone who does not wish for a different life or for better circumstances, but who fully embraces what is, not because it's easy or pleasant, but because it is theirs. To love your fate means to say yes to every part of it, even the pain, even the failure. It's not about pretending things are good, it's about refusing to retreat from reality. Eternal recurrence is the ultimate expression of this idea. If you can say yes to your life being repeated forever, exactly as it is, then you have achieved something close to spiritual strength. But Nietzsche knows how rare this is. In The Wanderer, Zarathustra reflects on solitude, on walking alone, on the distance that grows between himself and others. The more deeply he understands, the more isolated he becomes. This is not loneliness in the social sense, it's philosophical solitude, the sense that few, if any, are willing to walk the path to its end. In that silence, in the long climb up the mountain, Zarathustra begins to wrestle with the thought of recurrence. He is not yet ready to affirm it. The idea frightens him. It presses on him like a weight too heavy to bear. This is what Nietzsche would later call the greatest weight, the burden of knowing that you are responsible not just for what happens now, but for choosing your life as a whole, eternally. In On Involuntary Bliss, Zarathustra catches a glimpse of what such affirmation might feel like. He experiences a strange moment of joy, a sense of harmony with the universe, a sense that he is exactly where he should be. But the bliss is not something he commands or controls. It arrives suddenly, uninvited, and leaves just as quickly. This fleeting glimpse of joy serves as a contrast to the still unresolved inner tension. Zarathustra is not yet fully at peace with the idea of recurrence. He has tasted the possibility of total affirmation, but it has not yet become his reality. Then, in Before Sunrise, Zarathustra speaks more directly about truth, light, and solitude. He reflects on the burden of seeing what others refuse to see, on the price of clarity. Truth for Zarathustra is not a cold set of facts. It is something alive, something he must wrestle with in the dark before the dawn. And yet, he begins to find something like peace, not comfort, but a fierce acceptance of the path he is on. He realizes that he must prepare himself for the final confrontation with recurrence. He must train his soul to say yes, not just to the easy moments, but to the whole of life. This is where the abyss comes in. The abyss is not some external place of suffering. It is the recognition that life contains both beauty and horror, and that there is no escape from that. It is the understanding that we are thrown into a world we did not choose, and yet we are asked to affirm it, to say yes without illusion, without lies, without hope of some other world where things are better. Eternal recurrence forces us to face the abyss, and then to step forward anyway. Throughout part 3, Nietzsche does not give us easy answers. Zarathustra is not triumphant here. He is reflective, vulnerable, questioning. He has spoken great truths, and now he must live them. This part of the book is quieter, more introspective, but also deeper. It shows the emotional and psychological cost of philosophical commitment. To believe in the Übermensch, to preach the will to power, these are bold, defiant ideas. But to live them day after day with no reward, no applause, and no certainty, that is something much harder. This is why Nietzsche says, "The higher man must suffer more than the lower." The more you see, the more you feel. The more responsibility you take, the more pressure you bear. Most people will never face the thought of eternal recurrence, not because they lack the intelligence, but because they lack the courage. It is easier to believe in a final reward, or a better world, or a second chance. But Zarathustra refuses those illusions. He chooses reality, even when it hurts. And that choice, Nietzsche suggests, is the mark of greatness. So this part of the book is not about resolution, it is about preparation. Zarathustra is not yet ready to fully embrace eternal recurrence, but he is approaching it. He is drawing nearer to the moment when he must make a decision that defines everything. Will he affirm his life, or will he collapse under the weight of it? Will he become the one who dances even at the edge of the abyss? Or will he retreat into comfort, into safety, into the crowd? We don't get the answer yet. That comes later. But here, in part 3, we are given the question. And it's not a question just for Zarathustra. It's a question for all of us. If your life, exactly as it is, were to repeat forever, would you rejoice? Would you curse it? Or would you change something today so that the next time the demon comes, you can say yes, not out of pride, but out of truth? This is the challenge of eternal recurrence. This is the test Nietzsche gives us. And it is not a test you pass once, it is a test you face every single day. In part 4 of Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Nietzsche brings Zarathustra into contact with the so-called higher men, figures who are more developed, more reflective, and perhaps more courageous than the average person, but who still fall short of becoming the Übermensch. These characters are not villains, nor are they fools. In fact, they are tragic in a different way. They have tried to rise above the herd, and in doing so, they've become stuck in a different kind of trap. Spiritual pride, vanity, or ideological delusion. This section is one of the strangest and most complex in the entire book. It is filled with satire, symbolism, and irony, But beneath the strange scenes and characters is a clear message. Not all rebellion leads to transformation. Not all suffering leads to wisdom. And not all who seem high have truly overcome themselves. The chapter, The Cry of Distress, marks a turning point. Zarathustra hears a cry and follows it, expecting perhaps to find someone in need of guidance. Instead, he finds a man broken by the weight of truth. Someone who has seen too much, who has tried to rise but has fallen into despair. This sets the stage for the parade of higher men who follow. One by one they appear. They are kings who have lost their kingdoms, priests who have lost their faith, poets who are trapped in their own illusions, magicians who can no longer believe in their tricks. Each one represents a type of person who has tried to go beyond common life but has failed in a subtle, tragic way. In conversation with the kings, Zarathustra meets rulers who have grown tired of ruling. These are not tyrants but worn-out men, men who once held power and influence but who now seek something more. They admire Zarathustra because he represents freedom, a kind of spiritual nobility they've lost. But they also speak words that reveal their own emptiness. One of them says something close to, "What do we matter? Let the herd perish, but let the Übermensch live." This line sounds noble, but Nietzsche is pointing out a hidden danger, the temptation to care more about an idea than about people. The kings are no longer concerned with leading or improving the world. They've retreated into ideology. They want to see the birth of the Übermensch, but not to become him. They admire greatness, but they no longer strive for it. They have become spectators, not creators. Then comes the magician. This character is a clear reference to Richard Wagner, the famous composer and former friend of Nietzsche. The magician is an artist who dazzles with emotion and spectacle, but who lacks real depth. He weeps, he sings, he seduces the audience, but Zarathustra sees through it. He knows that beneath all the drama is weakness. The magician performs suffering instead of confronting it. He turns pain into a show. Nietzsche is warning us here about the danger of aestheticizing suffering, of turning real struggle into something shallow or performative. This is not true transformation. It is spiritual theatrics. What unites all these higher men is that they have each, in some way, touched the edge of greatness, but then retreated. They have suffered, yes. They have left the herd. They have seen truths that others ignore, but they have not gone far enough. They have not overcome themselves. They have not become free. Their pride, their roles, their identities keep them stuck. Zarathustra sees this and feels the weight of it. He had hoped to find allies, but instead he finds half-transformed beings, people who are still trapped in ego, memory, or the need to be admired. This brings us to the strange and satirical chapter, The Ass Festival. It's one of the most confusing scenes in the entire book, and intentionally so. The higher men, in an effort to celebrate, end up conducting a parody of a religious ceremony centered around a donkey. They bow to it, they sing to it, they make it the object of their devotion. This scene is absurd, almost cartoonish, but it's also deeply meaningful. Nietzsche is showing us that even those who have rejected traditional religion can easily fall into new forms of worship, just as empty, just as blind. The donkey represents stupidity, obedience, and herd-like thinking. And yet, here are the supposed higher men bowing to it. Why? Because the human impulse to bow, to worship, to follow is hard to kill. Even after God is dead, people still seek new idols. Nietzsche mocks this impulse mercilessly. The satire in The Ass Festival is not just aimed at others, it's a test for the reader too. Can you laugh at this scene? Can you see yourself in it? Have you ever replaced one system of belief with another, thinking it was your own, when it was just a new form of submission? Nietzsche is not trying to humiliate his characters, he's trying to wake us up. He's saying, even those on the path can fall, even those who have suffered can still be cowards, even those who seem wise can still be fools. And this brings us to one of the most painful insights in this section. Suffering alone is not enough. Nietzsche acknowledges that all these men have suffered deeply, but he also shows that suffering by itself does not transform you. It can make you bitter. It can make you proud. It can trap you in a story about how special or broken you are. True transformation only comes when suffering is used, not as a badge of honor, but as fuel, as raw material for creating something stronger. This is the deeper meaning of the line. All of them have suffered deeply, but it is suffering that creates transformation. Not suffering in itself, but suffering that is overcome, absorbed, and turned into power. By the end of these encounters, Zarathustra is weary. He realizes that he cannot lead these men any more than he could lead the crowd. He understands that each person must walk the path alone. Even those who seem close to the summit can still fall. The temptation to stop, to settle, to admire the view rather than keep climbing, it's everywhere. Zarathustra sees it, and he decides once again to retreat, to reflect, and to wait for the moment when he himself is ready to speak the deepest truths. Because even he, for all his insight, is still evolving. He is not finished. And this, perhaps, is Nietzsche's most humble message. The work of becoming never ends. This part of the book serves as a warning. It's not enough to be different. It's not enough to be wounded. It's not enough to reject the herd. What matters is what you do with your suffering, your insight, your solitude. Do you use it to rise, or do you turn it into a mask, a performance, or an excuse to feel superior? True transformation is subtle. It is often invisible. It does not bow to donkeys or chase applause or cling to pain like a trophy. It moves quietly. It burns inwardly. It rises not from status, but from the unshakable will to become. The higher men in Zarathustra's world are not villains. They are mirrors. They show us what happens when the journey is interrupted, when courage gives way to comfort, when ego gets mistaken for strength. And through them, Nietzsche asks us a question that echoes through the entire book. Will you stop here, or will you go further? That is the true final trial, not a battle with others, but a battle with the voice inside that says, "This is enough." Nietzsche's answer, through Zarathustra, is clear. It is never enough. The path continues. The fire must burn hotter, and the real work is still ahead. In the final two chapters of Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Nietzsche brings everything to a climax, not through argument, not through a final lesson or a moral conclusion, but through an emotional, poetic outpouring of joy, affirmation, and rebirth. These closing scenes, the drunken song and the sign, are filled with images of light, laughter, dancing, animals, eternity, and transformation. But they are not a retreat into fantasy or comfort. They are the result of everything that came before. The descent into solitude, the confrontation with suffering, the rejection of false prophets, the struggle with eternal recurrence. Zarathustra has endured all of it. Now, at last, he reaches a new kind of strength, a strength that doesn't come from conquering, resisting, or teaching, but from loving life exactly as it is. This is the moment of his rebirth. The drunken song is not a song of chaos or mindless pleasure. It is the song of someone who has seen the worst of life, its pain, its repetition, its absurdity, and still chooses to say yes. This yes is not naive. It is not shallow. It is the yes of someone who has walked through fire and come out the other side, not untouched, but stronger. Zarathustra now sings of joy, but this joy is not ordinary happiness. It is deeper. It is cosmic. It is tied to the very structure of time and being. All joy wants eternity, wants deep eternity, he declares. This line repeats like a chant, like a heartbeat. What does it mean? It means that true joy, the kind of joy that affirms life, does not want to pass away. It wants to last forever. It wants to be repeated. In other words, true joy is the acceptance of eternal recurrence. When you love something so much that you want it not just once, but again and again forever, then you have truly loved it. Then you have truly said yes to life. This is the final test that Zarathustra now passes. After all the struggle, the sorrow, the disappointment, he is now able to not just accept recurrence, but to rejoice in it. The demon from earlier, the one who whispered the terrifying possibility of eternal return, no longer frightens him. Zarathustra's answer is no longer hesitation or dread. His answer is yes. But this yes is not abstract. It is expressed through song, dance, and laughter. Nietzsche believed that the highest form of wisdom is not heavy, it is light, not because it ignores suffering, but because it carries it with strength. The image of Zarathustra dancing is one of the most important in the whole book. It connects back to earlier chapters, where he said that he would only believe in a God who could dance. Dancing is a metaphor for freedom, for grace, for moving with life instead of against it. To dance is to live without stiffness, without fear. And now, at the end, Zarathustra dances with eternity. He is no longer burdened by the past. He is no longer worried about convincing others. He is no longer looking backward or forward. He is present, alive, joyful. This is also where we see the fulfillment of an earlier image from the vision and the riddle. In that earlier chapter, Zarathustra described a shepherd with a snake in his throat, a symbol of the horror of recurrence, the feeling of being trapped in something you cannot escape. The snake represents the cycle, the loop, the unbearable repetition. But then Zarathustra cries out to the shepherd to bite, to take action, to affirm, to own what is happening. The shepherd bit as my cry had advised him. He bit with a good bite. That moment of biting is the turning point, the moment when the horror is overcome, not by escape, but by courage, by embracing it. And now, in the drunken song, we see what happens after the bite. Freedom. Zarathustra is free because he no longer wishes for life to be different. He no longer fights against time or pain or the past. He accepts the eternal return not as a punishment, but as the deepest expression of life's beauty. He has reached amor fati in its purest form, the love of fate. The final chapter, the sign, brings this transformation into a symbolic, almost mythical conclusion. Zarathustra wakes up and his animals, the eagle and the serpent, bring him a sign. What is the sign? It's not fire from the heavens or a voice from the sky. It is something small, almost playful. The animals laugh. They celebrate. They are light. And Zarathustra understands that the time of heavy burdens is over. The time of teaching is over. This is my morning. My day begins. Arise now. Arise. Great noon, he says. The great noon is not just the middle of the day. It is the moment of clarity, of culmination, of pure presence. This declaration, my day begins, is not about going back to the world to teach more disciples or spread a message. It is about living, fully, without hesitation. Zarathustra has let go of everything, the need to be understood, the need to be followed, the need to explain. What remains is pure affirmation. He does not just preach eternal recurrence, he lives it. He has become the embodiment of Nietzsche's ideal. Not a god, not a guru, but a human being who has overcome the past, overcome fear, and become whole. There's something paradoxical here. The man who once came down from the mountains to teach others has now gone beyond teaching. He no longer needs an audience. His joy is self-sufficient. His life is its own answer. And that is the deepest transformation of all. Nietzsche ends the book not with a conclusion, not with a summary, but with a feeling. The feeling of waking up after a long darkness, of laughing after deep grief, of dancing after pain. Zarathustra has been reborn, not into a new doctrine, but into a new way of being. So what does all of this mean for us? It means that the path to becoming who you are is not a straight line. It means that suffering is not the end, nor is solitude or rejection or doubt. All of these are stages, necessary fires. And if you endure them honestly, without turning away, something new emerges. Not a perfect person, not a master, but a self who can finally say yes to their life. Not because it was easy, but because it was theirs. Nietzsche doesn't offer comfort, he offers challenge. But at the end of that challenge is not despair, it is joy, a joy that dances, a joy that wants eternity. Thus spoke Zarathustra ends not with answers, but with a return to life, and that perhaps is the most important lesson of all. No matter how far you go, no matter how high you climb, no matter how deep you suffer, the goal is not to escape life, but to return to it, to say yes to it, to affirm it, and to live it again and again and again. Will you say yes? Will you bite the snake? Will you dance at the edge of the abyss? That is the question Nietzsche leaves us with, and only you can answer it. What does it mean to own yourself? Are you truly in control of your thoughts, actions, and destiny? Or are you simply following a script that society, family, and past experiences have written for you? It's easy to live life on autopilot, caught in daily routines and responsibilities without ever questioning why we think and behave the way we do. When we talk about owning yourself, we're talking about the practice of becoming fully aware of who you are at your core. This includes acknowledging your conscious desires, recognizing any hidden motivations lurking beneath the surface, and embracing the parts of yourself that might feel uncomfortable or even frightening. It's about stepping into your life with a sense of confidence and clarity, rather than passively letting the outside world shape every decision you make. This journey towards self-ownership can be complex, but if there is one thinker whose work can guide us through the maze of our inner world, it's Carl Jung. Jung's ideas on the human psyche focus on how our thoughts and emotions emerge from both conscious and unconscious depths. By learning to navigate these realms, we can move closer to true self-ownership, where we make our choices based on a profound understanding of ourselves rather than out of habit or fear. To really grasp this concept of owning yourself, let's define it in simple terms. Think of it as living authentically and embracing every part of your psyche, from the aspects you're proud of to those you might find embarrassing or troubling. Often people try to hide certain traits or impulses because of societal expectations or personal shame. But Jung's philosophy suggests that we can never truly become whole if we're ignoring large chunks of who we are. By bringing our hidden parts into the light, we can start to manage them instead of letting them control us from the shadows. Self-ownership also involves understanding the powerful role the unconscious plays in our everyday choices. Sometimes our conscious mind thinks it's in charge, but underlying fears, desires, and past traumas can influence our behavior without us realizing it. Jung argued that if we don't confront these deeper elements, they'll continue to guide us in ways that feel fated or out of our control. Once we learn how to engage with these hidden facets, however, we gain the freedom to decide how we truly want to act. That's the essence of self-ownership, merging the conscious and unconscious aspects of our being, so we can live in alignment with our truest nature. Over the course of this video, we'll explore how Jung's concepts provide a roadmap for that integration. We'll dig into his major ideas, like the ego, the persona, and the shadow, to see how they shape our personalities and guide our relationships with others. We'll also discuss the more subtle areas of his work, such as the anima, animus archetypes, and the collective unconscious, showing how they offer hints about the universal patterns we all share as human beings. Finally, we'll connect these theories to real-world strategies you can use in your daily life. From journaling prompts to dream analysis, we'll look at ways to dive deeper into your inner world and bring any hidden issues to light. This is why Jung's perspective is so powerful in self-development. He believed real growth isn't just about adding on new skills or habits, it's about knowing and befriending every corner of your mind. My fascination with Jung began when I started reading some of his original works and realized how much they explained the struggles and triumphs of my own life. The more I studied his writings, like Memories, Dreams, Reflections, and his famous explorations into symbols and myths, the more I understood that true self-improvement isn't about perfection. Instead, it's about the courageous act of confronting the parts of ourselves we'd rather hide. By the end of this video, I hope you'll feel inspired to begin or continue your own journey of self-discovery, and that you'll discover just how transformative Jung's insights can be for anyone willing to face the depths of their own mind. Carl Gustav Jung was born in 1875 in the small Swiss village of Kessville, situated along the shores of Lake Constance. Growing up, he was deeply curious about the inner lives of people and the nature of existence, a fascination likely influenced by his father, who was a pastor, and his mother, who held a strong interest in mysticism. While Jung showed signs of introversion from an early age, preferring solitary play and quiet contemplation, he also had an active imagination that sparked his interest in folklore and ancient myths. These formative years in Switzerland, surrounded by its serene landscapes and rich cultural heritage, provided Jung with a fertile environment to explore both the outer world and his inner thoughts. After studying medicine at the University of Basel, Jung specialized in psychiatry, a field that allowed him to merge his passion for science with his deep-seated interest in dreams, spirituality, and human consciousness. Early in his career, Jung became intrigued by the work of Sigmund Freud, whose studies on the unconscious mind were pioneering at the time. Their eventual collaboration, often marked by intense discussions and shared excitement about the uncharted territory of human psychology, set the stage for many breakthroughs in understanding the psyche. However, their relationship took a sharp turn when they reached fundamental disagreements over the nature of the unconscious, driving Jung to break away from Freudian psychoanalysis and forge his own path. During his professional journey, Jung introduced several key milestones that changed the landscape of psychology. Chief among them was the development of analytical psychology, a framework that broadened the scope of what was then known about the unconscious. Whereas Freud largely viewed the unconscious through a lens of repressed sexual and aggressive urges, Jung believed it was richer and more expansive. He proposed that the unconscious contained layers beyond personal experiences, connecting individuals through common myths and symbols. Another significant milestone was the publication of the Red Book, a compilation of Jung's private writings and illustrations that documented his intense self-exploration, including vivid dreams and active imagination sessions. This personal record was kept hidden for many years before being released to the public, and it offered an unparalleled look into the depths of Jung's psyche, revealing how he wrestled with visions, symbolic imagery, and profound existential questions. By exposing his own process of introspection, Jung highlighted the value of self-inquiry as a way to truly understand human nature. Jung's influence extends well beyond the walls of academia, in part because his ideas remain surprisingly relevant in modern psychology and self-development circles. Take, for instance, the popular concepts of introversion and extroversion, which Jung first introduced as distinctive ways in which people orient their energy, either inward toward their inner world or outward toward external activities and relationships. This simple distinction laid the groundwork for countless personality tests, including the well-known Myers-Briggs type indicator, which is still widely used today. Similarly, his theory of the collective unconscious, the idea that all humans share a vast reservoir of ancestral memories and symbols, captured the imaginations of artists, writers, and filmmakers who found in Jung's work a language to describe universal patterns in myth and storytelling. Then there is the concept of archetypes, universal figures like the hero, the wise old man, and the mother, which Jung argued appear in various religions, cultures, and fairy tales across the globe. These archetypal patterns help explain why certain symbols or narratives resonate so powerfully with us, no matter where we come from. By giving shape to these universal themes, Jung allowed individuals to see that their personal struggles, dreams, and triumphs are often part of a much larger human story. What sets Jung apart and makes him so relevant even in the age of social media and rapid technological change is his holistic approach to the human mind. He believed that to understand ourselves fully, we must look beyond behavior and conscious thoughts to include the deeper, more mysterious realms of our psyche. Unlike many thinkers who reduce human actions to purely logical or purely instinctive processes, Jung saw the psyche as a blend of conscious desires, unconscious motivations, archetypal forces, cultural influences, and personal history. This inclusive outlook points us toward a more balanced sense of self-awareness, where we learn to recognize that our fears, dreams, and insights might be connected to larger patterns we share with other people. Such an understanding can feel both humbling and empowering. Humbling, because we see we're not as isolated or unique as we might have assumed, and empowering, because we realize we have the freedom to shape our destiny once we understand the forces playing out in our minds. Ultimately, the question, how do we own ourselves in a world that often pushes us toward conformity, becomes more approachable when we apply Jung's lens. If owning yourself means being true to your individuality, you first need to recognize all the influences that shape your perspective, both inside your mind and in the social world around you. By studying Jung's life and work, we see the importance of daring to go beyond the usual explanations for why we feel the way we do. He demonstrated through his break with Freud and through his groundbreaking ideas that it's possible to challenge mainstream viewpoints when they no longer serve your deeper truth. Jung's example encourages each of us to examine our internal processes, our dreams, personal fears, unspoken desires, and to integrate them consciously so we can stand firm in who we are. In a society that often favors quick fixes, shallow appearances, and instant gratification, Jung's emphasis on sustained introspection and inner growth serves as a welcome reminder that real transformation comes from confronting the depths of our minds. Through this confrontation, we learn to own our behavior, our choices, and ultimately, ourselves. When Carl Jung talks about the structure of the psyche, he's describing the different layers and components that make up who we are as individuals. It's not just our everyday thoughts and conscious decisions. There's also a vast realm of influences that exist beneath the surface, which he calls the unconscious. According to Jung, our psyche can be understood through several key elements: the ego, the persona, and the self. These concepts might sound abstract, but they're actually ways of describing how we experience life, how we present ourselves to the world, and what holds all our different pieces together. The ego is the center of our conscious mind, meaning it's responsible for our day-to-day awareness and sense of I. The persona, on the other hand, is more like a social mask, something we wear to fit into different situations, whether it's at work, school, or with friends. Finally, the self is the ultimate unifying element of our psyche, the part that brings together both our conscious awareness and our unconscious material into one whole. When you start to see how these components interact, it becomes easier to understand your motivations, navigate your relationships, and make decisions that feel true to who you really are. First, let's explore the ego, which is often the starting point when discussing Jung's idea of the psyche. The ego represents our conscious mind, the part of ourselves that we usually identify with on an everyday basis. It's what we refer to when we say things like, I think, I feel, or I want. Think of the ego as the manager of your conscious experiences. It processes everything coming in through your senses, organizes your thoughts, and decides how you should respond to the world around you. On the positive side, having a strong ego means having a clear sense of self-direction, knowing what you believe in, and being able to express yourself confidently. However, the ego can also become a barrier to growth if it grows too large or rigid. In these cases, we can fall into what some call ego traps, behaviors driven by pride, defensiveness, or stubbornness that keep us stuck. For instance, if your ego refuses to admit when it's wrong, you might find yourself making excuses instead of recognizing a valuable lesson. Likewise, if your ego is consumed with proving you're always right, you may miss out on genuinely helpful feedback. While the ego is essential for day-to-day functioning, it's just one part of the story. If we only live from ego consciousness, we end up ignoring the deeper layers of who we are, like our hidden dreams, fears, and potentials that remain buried in the unconscious. Next comes the persona, a term that comes from the Latin word for mask. In Jung's model, the persona is the face we show to the world, the roles we play to meet societal expectations, and the behavior we adopt to interact with others. Think about how you might behave in a job interview compared to how you act with close friends on a relaxed weekend. Those differences reflect the changing nature of the persona. We adjust it to fit the demands of different environments. This adaptation can be beneficial because it helps us function smoothly in society. For example, you wouldn't want to tell your boss every personal thought that crosses your mind, nor would you talk to a teacher with the same casual approach you might use with your best friend. However, problems arise when we start confusing our persona with our true selves. If you get too comfortable wearing your mask, you can lose touch with your genuine feelings, desires, and opinions. You might start living life based on what you think others expect from you, rather than what resonates deep within. To truly own yourself, it's crucial to recognize that the persona serves a purpose, facilitating social interactions, but it should never dominate to the extent that we forget who we are without the mask. By becoming aware of how your persona shifts from situation to situation, you'll gain a clearer understanding of your authentic self, which lies beneath these surface-level presentations. While the ego and persona deal primarily with our conscious selves and how we relate to the outer world, the self in Jungian psychology is a far more encompassing concept. Jung described the self as the center of our entire psyche, both conscious and unconscious. It's the part that integrates everything about us, including the traits we're proud of and those we'd rather keep hidden. You can imagine the self as the root system of a tree, with the ego as the trunk and the persona as the leaves. The ego and persona might be easier to see and define, but the self is what grounds you, connecting you not only to the personal unconscious, unique to your life experiences, but also to the collective unconscious, the universal themes and archetypes shared by all humans. Finding alignment with the self is what Jung referred to as individuation, a process of becoming the most authentic, whole version of yourself. This doesn't happen overnight. It's a lifelong journey that involves exploring your dreams, acknowledging your fears, and making peace with the aspects of your personality you might have rejected. The goal is not to eradicate your persona or flatten your ego. Rather, it's to balance these parts in a way that's faithful to your inner essence. When you operate from a place that honors yourself, you're better able to engage with others without losing sight of your own values, boundaries, and passions. It's vital to remember that each of these components, ego, persona, and self, also interacts with your unconscious, which is like a hidden reservoir of thoughts, memories, and energies that lie outside your everyday awareness. The unconscious can influence you in ways you might not immediately recognize, shaping your preferences, fears, and even the way you respond to stress. Jung believes that understanding these unconscious processes is key to owning yourself fully because it frees you from being ruled by hidden impulses. Instead of unknowingly acting out fears or desires, you become aware of them and can choose whether or not to let them guide your decisions. This awareness is a cornerstone of personal development according to Jung, and it's one of the reasons his theories remain so helpful in modern self-improvement strategies. So, what does this all mean for someone looking to gain a better sense of who they are and how to navigate life? Essentially, learning to recognize your ego can help you become more mindful of when your pride or defensiveness is getting in the way of personal growth. Being aware of the persona you present to others can help you avoid losing yourself in the roles that society, family, or friends might expect you to play. Most importantly, pursuing an understanding of the self leads you to a kind of psychological wholeness that goes beyond simply adopting new habits or chasing external goals. Instead, you're aiming to reconcile your inner complexities, acknowledging that you're both shaped by your conscious plans and driven by your unconscious motivations. By doing so, you move closer to genuine self-ownership, a state in which you feel at home with yourself and confident in your ability to face life's challenges without always needing to hide behind a mask or yield to a fragile ego. This deeper sense of integration is precisely what makes Jung's insights so invaluable for anyone searching for a more meaningful, authentic way to live. Carl Jung introduced the concept of the shadow to describe the parts of ourselves we tend to hide, reject, or deny, often without even realizing we're doing so. Unlike the persona, which represents the socially acceptable face we show to others, the shadow is made up of qualities that seem too difficult, frightening, or socially unacceptable to openly acknowledge. Many people misunderstand the shadow as some kind of evil presence lurking in our psyches, but Jung never intended it to be viewed as purely negative. Instead, he suggested that these hidden traits could be anything we've decided, consciously or unconsciously, to keep under wraps. They might include jealousy, rage, selfishness, or traits we consider embarrassing, like certain desires or habits. However, the shadow can also hold positive qualities that were stifled early on, like creativity we were told wasn't practical, or confidence we were taught to see as arrogance. By calling these aspects the shadow, Jung wanted to emphasize that they lie just out of our conscious sight, but they still affect us in powerful ways. One question that often arises is, why do these parts of ourselves end up repressed or neglected in the first place? It's largely due to a mixture of fear, societal rules, and moral beliefs. From a young age, we learn that certain behaviors lead to disapproval or punishment, so we hide them to fit in. For example, if a child is repeatedly scolded for showing anger or vulnerability, that child might lock those feelings away in order to avoid further rejection. Similarly, if our culture views sensitivity as a weakness, we might suppress that side of ourselves to appear strong and capable. Over time, we forget we've even made these decisions because the process happens gradually. Unfortunately, ignoring or denying these shadowy traits doesn't mean they disappear. They often manifest in projection, where we see in others the flaws we refuse to see in ourselves. This can lead to irrational fears, strained relationships, and deep-seated discomfort with who we are. If we go on pretending these traits don't exist, unresolved conflicts and tension can build up until they overflow in unhealthy ways, like sudden outbursts or chronic anxiety. Recognizing that we all have a shadow is the first step toward a more complete and honest self-understanding. But how do we actually identify what's in our personal shadow? Jung believed we could find clues through the very things that bother us the most in others. If you find yourself deeply annoyed by someone's arrogance, for instance, it might be that you're wrestling with your own pride, which you've tried to keep under control or deny entirely. Another way to discover shadow material is through dreams, since dreams often present symbols and scenarios that our conscious minds might shy away from. If you keep a dream journal, you can look for patterns or themes that make you uncomfortable, noting recurring images or characters that might be hinting at repressed thoughts or feelings. Even simple self-reflection, where you ask yourself direct questions like, what qualities do I admire in others but feel afraid to express? Or, what do I judge harshly in myself or others? Can shine light on traits that you've pushed into the dark. Because this kind of exploration can feel daunting, many people find it helpful to work with a therapist, especially one knowledgeable about Jungian ideas, who can guide them through the process with empathy and expertise. What people often call shadow work is the practice of consciously engaging with these hidden aspects of ourselves. This can include journaling, where you write freely about situations that trigger intense emotions and then reflect on what those emotions might be telling you. Meditation can also be a powerful tool. By sitting quietly and observing your own thoughts without judgment, you create space for repressed feelings to surface. Some individuals find group settings or close friendships beneficial for this work, as open and supportive conversations can bring insight into qualities we might be overlooking. Others choose to do it in private, at least initially, experimenting with methods like active imagination, which Jung advocated for deeper dialogue with inner figures or symbolic images. No matter the approach, shadow work requires courage. It involves facing shame, guilt, or fear, emotions we usually try to avoid. But it's worth noting that the purpose isn't to judge yourself more harshly, it's to bring compassion and understanding to these neglected parts of your psyche. By acknowledging them, you reduce their power to sabotage you from the inside out. Of course, the real reason for doing shadow work isn't just to examine old wounds, it's to own yourself more completely. Once you recognize and integrate your hidden traits, you can harness their energy in positive ways. For instance, let's say you discover a previously repressed anger that has been showing up as passive-aggressive behavior or random irritability. By working through the shadow, you might find a more direct and healthy way to assert your needs, perhaps learning to communicate boundaries more clearly or channeling intense emotion into art or physical activity. Instead of stumbling through life with pent-up frustrations, you develop an honest relationship with your anger, allowing it to inform you when something is genuinely unfair or threatening. Similarly, if you've been denying your own vulnerability for years, you might find that embracing it can lead to deeper connections with others and a richer emotional life. In both cases, acknowledging these dark traits lessens their destructive potential and opens a path to authenticity. To see how transformative this can be, imagine a personal anecdote. Let's say there's a person who grew up believing that being needy was unacceptable. In childhood, they may have learned to hide any sign of needing help or reassurance from parents, friends, or teachers. As an adult, this individual might pride themselves on self-reliance, refusing to ask for assistance even when it's clearly needed. Inevitably, the bottled-up sense of isolation and struggle may lead to resentment or burnout. Through shadow work, they realize that their so-called neediness is actually just a natural human desire for support and connection. Once they integrate this part of themselves, recognizing there's nothing wrong with occasionally depending on others, they experience genuine relief. They stop seeing themselves as a burden and allow people in their life to offer help, leading to healthier relationships and a more balanced lifestyle. This integration doesn't destroy their independence, it simply balances it with vulnerability and trust. Ultimately, embracing your shadow is one of the most important steps toward true self-ownership, because it involves claiming everything about who you are, rather than just the parts you find socially acceptable or personally comfortable. It gives you the freedom to break out of conditioned patterns that may have followed you for years. When you no longer have to constantly push down or mask certain emotions, you open up space for deeper creativity, empathy, and resilience. Rather than being at the mercy of hidden impulses, you become a more integrated and adaptable person. Moreover, you gain a new perspective on the challenges you face in daily life, recognizing that sometimes what you see as a purely external problem may actually reflect a conflict within. By understanding and working with your shadow, you transform unconscious tendencies into conscious choices, which is exactly what self-ownership is all about. You're no longer living in reaction to the parts of yourself you haven't examined. Instead, you're able to meet life's ups and downs with a grounded sense of who you are, including the darker corners of your psyche you once feared to explore. When Carl Jung uses the word individuation, he's referring to a lifelong process in which we gradually integrate all the different pieces of who we are: our conscious attitudes, our hidden emotions, our past traumas, our dreams, and even our cultural or ancestral influences into a unified self. In many ways, individuation can be seen as a process of becoming whole. Most of us walk around carrying split identities. There's the version of ourselves we know consciously, as well as a host of overlooked or undeveloped parts that live out of sight. The goal of individuation is to bring as many of these pieces as possible into alignment. It's not about achieving a perfect state of harmony, because life is rarely that tidy, but about constantly striving toward greater self-awareness and authenticity. By taking the time to reflect on why we think, feel, and behave the way we do, we begin to see that our personality isn't fixed or one-dimensional. Rather, it's an ever-evolving blend of traits, desires, and experiences that shape who we are in each moment. Jung believed that the more integrated our psyche becomes, the more stable and capable we are at handling the ups and downs of life. We become less prone to knee-jerk reactions triggered by unknown fears, and more open to the gentle nudges of our unconscious mind, which can guide us toward growth and creativity if we learn to listen. In Jung's view, this path to wholeness unfolds through several stages. First, we have to recognize the roles we play in everyday life, what Jung called the persona. This involves asking ourselves how we show up in different social settings and whether these public masks have overshadowed our true feelings or made us lose sight of our genuine needs and desires. Next, we must confront the shadow, or those aspects of ourselves we've suppressed for one reason or another. This is often a challenging step because no one likes to face the parts of their personality they find embarrassing or even shameful. However, coming to terms with these traits can be deeply freeing, as it relieves us from the constant effort of pretending they don't exist. Once we've started integrating the persona and the shadow, we move on to understanding and balancing our inner feminine or masculine qualities, what Jung called the anima in men and animus in women. The idea here is not that we each have rigidly defined male or female traits, but that all humans have a mixture of both energies within them. By accepting this blend, we enrich our emotional and creative lives. Finally, after navigating these layers, we edge closer to the self, which is the guiding center of our entire psyche. Reaching this stage isn't something that just happens one day. Rather, it's a continual process of refinement, an ongoing dance between what we know about ourselves and what we still have yet to discover. Why does individuation matter? The short answer is that we can't own ourselves fully if we ignore significant parts of our nature. Imagine trying to drive a car while denying the existence of certain warning lights. Sooner or later, those neglected signals will cause a breakdown. In psychological terms, if we keep pushing aside uncomfortable emotions, personal conflicts, or questions about our identity, they tend to resurface in unhealthy ways, like sudden anger, persistent anxiety, or a deep sense of dissatisfaction with life. Individuation helps us address these warning signs before they become crises. It offers a structured way of recognizing that every aspect of our inner world, even the messy or painful parts, serves a purpose. By learning to listen to what's happening within us, we develop emotional resilience and a stronger sense of self. Jung often compared this process to the hero's journey, a narrative pattern in myths and stories where the main character sets out on a quest, faces trials, finds hidden strengths, and returns home transformed. Similarly, individuation calls us to venture into the depths of our own psyche, armed with curiosity, courage, and humility, in order to unearth deeper truths. While it may feel daunting or even frightening at times, the ultimate reward is a richer, more meaningful life. We learn to guide ourselves with an internal compass that points toward our most genuine inclinations, rather than letting outside pressures dictate who we should be. But this journey is rarely smooth, partly because there are many common roadblocks that get in the way. One of the biggest is social or familial pressure. Our friends, relatives, or culture might expect us to behave in certain ways, pursue certain careers, or adopt certain beliefs. If we blindly follow these expectations, we risk suppressing our own voice, delaying the individuation process. Over time, this can create inner turmoil because our outer life no longer matches our true inner experience. Another major obstacle is the lack of self-reflection. In a busy, fast-paced world filled with distractions, cell phones, social media, and endless entertainment options, it's easy to skim over the surface of life without ever pausing to ask deeper questions about who we are. Spending time alone, journaling, or practicing any form of mindfulness can feel uncomfortable at first, especially if we've spent years ignoring the more shadowy parts of our psyche. Nevertheless, developing a habit of introspection is essential if we want to peel back the layers that hold valuable insights. Finally, fear of change can keep us stuck. Even when we sense that our current way of living isn't fully aligned with our deeper values, the idea of uprooting our habits and shifting our sense of identity can seem terrifying. We might cling to old routines because they feel safe, even if they no longer help us grow. Jung's work reminds us that change is often a necessary ingredient in the quest for wholeness, and that initial discomfort can lead to long-term rewards if we dare to move through it. Despite these challenges, the journey of individuation can be deeply rewarding. As we integrate our conscious intentions with our unconscious impulses, we discover a more coherent sense of who we are and what we stand for. We might realize, for example, that a childhood interest we abandoned due to parental disapproval still brings us joy and should be rekindled. Or we might discover that a so-called negative trait like sensitivity is actually a powerful gift when channeled correctly. On this path, breakthroughs often arrive in unexpected ways, perhaps through a dream that illuminates a hidden conflict or a sudden emotional reaction that reveals a long-standing desire. We learn to see these moments as valuable clues rather than random occurrences. Each clue helps us piece together a fuller picture of our psyche, leading us closer to the kind of self-ownership that's rooted in awareness and acceptance, rather than denial or pretense. Ultimately, individuation isn't about becoming perfect or reaching a final destination. It's a dynamic state of continually weaving together different threads of our inner life. We recognize that we contain multiple facets, some bright and some dark, but we also learn not to judge ourselves too harshly for being incomplete. Instead, we embrace the idea that every experience, whether painful or joyous, can teach us something about who we are. By following Jung's roadmap of encountering the persona, confronting the shadow, and balancing the anima animus, we gain a deeper insight into ourselves and our relationships with others. And by persistently nudging ourselves toward the self, we move beyond superficial definitions of success or happiness into a more profound sense of harmony with our own nature. This doesn't mean life becomes easy overnight, but it does mean we approach each challenge with a level of inner resourcefulness that only comes from honest self-examination. In this way, individuation becomes the ultimate act of self-care, a gradual yet powerful process of becoming who we were always meant to be. One of Carl Jung's most fascinating contributions to psychology is his concept of the collective unconscious, which he believed existed beyond the realm of personal experiences. While your personal unconscious holds thoughts, memories, and impulses tied directly to your individual life, the collective unconscious contains patterns and images, what Jung called archetypes, that are shared by all people. Think of it like a universal blueprint for human experience. These archetypal forms are inherited in much the same way that certain instincts are passed down through generations of animals. Even though our cultures, languages, and personal histories differ, there are fundamental themes and characters that show up in myths, stories, and dreams around the world. Examples include the mother, a nurturing figure who offers comfort and sustenance. The hero, who embarks on a journey to conquer challenges and bring change. The wise old man, who provides insight or guidance. And the trickster, a mischievous character who disrupts order to spark growth or reveal hidden truths. We might think of these as universal storylines that appear in countless fairy tales, religious texts, and works of literature, evidence that human beings are connected by more than just shared biology. According to Jung, these archetypes aren't just interesting coincidences. They act like hidden scripts in our own unconscious minds, influencing our goals, relationships, fears, and aspirations in ways we seldom recognize consciously. This idea of a collective unconscious can profoundly shape our sense of personal identity, because it suggests that every individual's life story is woven into broader human themes. For example, if you've ever found yourself unexpectedly identifying with a mythical hero, or you feel drawn to certain kinds of symbolic art, you might be tapping into these universal patterns. Societal myths and stories don't just entertain us, they mirror our deeper experiences and guide us in navigating life's challenges. Consider modern superhero movies. They often retell classic archetypal narratives of good versus evil, sacrifice, and redemption. These stories resonate with so many people because they echo the universal blueprint we all carry inside, reminding us of the hero's quest to overcome adversity. When we recognize these archetypes in our dreams, relationships, or creative pursuits, we start to see that certain repeated symbols aren't just random. Perhaps you often dream of climbing a steep mountain, which could represent the hero's struggle to accomplish a daunting task. Or you might notice you're drawn to friends who play the wise old man or the mother role in your life. These insights tell us more than just superficial facts about ourselves. They hint at deeper psychological processes and needs, like the need to grow, to be guided, or to be nurtured, that connect us to everyone else who's ever walked the earth. So how does this tie back to the concept of owning yourself and directing your life intentionally? If we remain unaware of the archetypal forces driving our thoughts and actions, we may blindly follow narratives that don't truly serve us. For instance, someone might always feel compelled to play the hero in their personal relationships, rushing in to save others without noticing how it harms their own well-being or denies other people the chance to solve their own problems. Or consider someone who constantly falls under the sway of the trickster archetype, drawn to chaotic or disruptive behavior that can negatively affect their friendships or career. Becoming conscious of these patterns means recognizing when we're being pulled into a particular storyline and consciously deciding how to respond. Awareness doesn't mean we stop relating to archetypes altogether. These are universal energies that often bring richness and meaning to our lives. Instead, it means we gain the freedom to shape our behavior and attitudes more deliberately. By observing these patterns in ourselves, we can decide whether we want to embrace them, modify them, or step away from them entirely. This is vital to self-ownership because it shifts our choices from unconscious habit to conscious deliberation. Practical strategies for exploring the collective unconscious and archetypes can be as varied as the archetypes themselves. One approach is to study myths and legends from different cultures. You could compare the roles heroes play in Greek mythology, for example, to those in modern comic books, noting how certain themes repeat. This kind of comparative reading helps you become more sensitive to archetypal patterns, both in fiction and in your own life. Another useful method is to engage with symbolic art, whether it's medieval paintings, abstract works, or images from tarot decks. These forms of expression often tap into archetypal symbolism, giving you a visual means of connecting with universal concepts like transformation, rebirth, or guidance. As you reflect on these images, ask yourself which of them stir your emotions the most. What might that say about the archetypes that resonate with you on a subconscious level? Jung also proposed an exercise called active imagination, which invites you to directly engage with the figures or images that appear in your dreams or your daydreams. Suppose you keep having a dream about an old mysterious mentor showing you a path through a forest. Rather than dismissing it as random, you could spend time visualizing this character in a relaxed, almost meditative state and begin a mental dialogue. Ask questions. What are you trying to show me? Or, how can I handle the challenges I face? While this might sound odd at first, it's a way of respectfully listening to the messages your unconscious is trying to deliver. In doing so, you might unlock insights about your personal challenges or desires that you've been overlooking. Over time, you'll learn to recognize particular archetypal figures, like a nurturing mother figure or a rebellious trickster, and see how they may be guiding you, cautioning you, or revealing hidden desires. In all these ways, the collective unconscious reminds us that our personal story is connected to a vast web of shared human experiences. You might have a dream symbolizing the hero's quest at the same time someone else on the other side of the world is painting a picture that draws on the same archetype, even if you don't know each other. This interconnectedness can be both humbling and empowering. It's humbling because we realize we're not as isolated or unique as we might have thought. On some level, everyone is traveling through similar psychological landscapes. At the same time, it's empowering because understanding these universal patterns allows us to draw wisdom from the collective pool. When you acknowledge that your anxieties, yearnings, and hopes reflect timeless human themes, you can also tap into the timeless courage, resilience, and innovation humans have shown throughout history. Ultimately, working with the collective unconscious and archetypes is another step in the journey towards self-ownership, because it helps us see ourselves in a broader context, freeing us from the illusion that we're alone in our struggles or that our dreams are meaningless. Instead, every fear, every joy, every obstacle can be reframed as part of a grand archetypal narrative that has played out in countless forms across continents and centuries. We might even find inspiration from these recurring stories, using their wisdom to navigate our own challenges with clarity and confidence. For instance, knowing you're living out a hero's journey can give you courage in tough times, while understanding the mother archetype might help you nurture those around you or yourself more compassionately. The point is not to limit yourself to just one role, but rather to recognize that you contain fragments of many archetypes. When you see these larger forces at work, you gain the power to decide how and when to engage with them. This ultimately enriches your sense of self, enabling you to stand more firmly on your own 2 feet, grounded in both your personal experiences and the universal tapestry of the human psyche. Once you have a basic understanding of Jung's major concepts, like the persona, the shadow, the anima, animus, and the collective unconscious, the next question becomes, how do I actually use these ideas to take more ownership of my life? While Jung's theories can feel abstract or academic at times, there are very practical steps you can take to connect with your unconscious mind and begin the process of integrating the parts of yourself you've overlooked or denied. These steps don't require years of study or a special background in psychology. All you need is a willingness to look inward and a bit of courage to face what you find there. By incorporating simple yet powerful practices like journaling, active imagination, creative expression, and mindfulness, you can bring tangible results into your everyday life, helping you to grow more self-aware, authentic, and confident. One of the most accessible ways to start is through self-reflection and journal prompts. Keeping a journal might sound ordinary, but it can become a powerful tool for exploring your internal world. Jungian psychology emphasizes the importance of noticing what lies beneath the surface, and writing things down is an excellent way to discover patterns you might miss otherwise. A good place to begin is with open-ended questions that challenge you to identify the traits you're unconsciously hiding or projecting. For instance, you can ask yourself, what qualities do I admire yet deny in myself? This question targets the things you admire in other people but feel reluctant to claim as part of your own identity, like leadership, creativity, or boldness. Another revealing prompt is, what traits annoy me in others that might reflect my own shadow? Perhaps you find it annoying when someone is too loud or selfish, only to realize through honest self-examination that you sometimes crave attention or harbor selfish impulses. By writing out these questions and your responses, you create a tangible record of your thoughts, making it easier to spot recurring themes or emotional triggers. Over time, you may realize that you keep circling back to similar patterns, like a constant need for approval or a fear of confrontation, that indicate hidden parts of your psyche crying out for recognition. Beyond journaling, an exercise closely linked to Jung's work is active imagination, which offers a more direct way of speaking to your unconscious mind. Unlike traditional meditation, where the goal is to quiet your thoughts, Active imagination encourages an inner dialogue with whatever figures, symbols, or characters emerge from your psyche. Let's say you have a recurring dream figure or a strong emotional reaction to a certain archetype, such as a wise mentor or a cunning trickster. During a quiet moment, you might close your eyes and imagine meeting this figure in a place that feels safe and comfortable to you. Then allow yourself to have a conversation. Ask questions, listen for responses, and observe how the figure reacts. It might feel strange at first, but this method can be incredibly enlightening because it bypasses your conscious defenses. Many people find that by engaging with their unconscious in this way, they uncover insights about fears, desires, or memories they hadn't recognized consciously. Over time, this dialogue can lead to deeper healing as you address long-ignored emotional wounds and begin to integrate them into a more coherent sense of self. Sometimes individual work is just the beginning, and you may feel you'd benefit from the perspective of others who share your interest in Jungian ideas or depth psychology in general. That's where therapy and group work come in. A Jungian analyst, or any therapist familiar with Jung's concepts, can serve as a guide through your unconscious territory. Through regular sessions, you and your therapist might explore your dreams, analyze projections, or discuss how archetypal themes are playing out in your life. Group discussions and retreats can also provide valuable insights, especially when people share their experiences with similar archetypes or unconscious patterns. Hearing someone else describe the same struggle you're going through can be incredibly validating, reminding you that these hidden challenges are more common than you might think. Furthermore, group settings often spark revelations you might not arrive at on your own as you witness different approaches to handling similar inner obstacles. Whether you choose a support group, a weekend workshop, or an intensive retreat, being part of a community that recognizes the importance of inner work can help you feel less alone in your quest to own yourself more fully. Another highly effective route to accessing hidden parts of your psyche is artistic expression. Jung himself was a strong advocate for the power of creativity to bring unconscious content to light. Whether you're painting, sculpting, writing poetry, or even dancing, you engage a more intuitive, less analytical part of your mind. You don't need to be a trained artist to benefit from this kind of expression. In fact, putting aside the desire for a perfect final product can be liberating because it allows you to focus on the process rather than the outcome. Symbolic doodles, color choices that feel instinctive, or spontaneous images can all serve as gateways to hidden emotions or memories. The key is not to overanalyze your creations right away. Instead, try simply allowing them to exist on the page or the canvas. Later, you can revisit your work and reflect on any shapes, themes, or colors that pop out. Often, something as simple as doodling can reveal you're harboring more stress than you realized, or that you crave a certain type of emotional release. By letting your creativity flow freely, you grant your unconscious a platform to express itself in ways that words alone might not capture. Of course, all this inner exploration can feel overwhelming if you don't have a way to ground yourself in the here and now. That's why daily mindfulness and meditation practices are so valuable. These don't need to be complicated or time-consuming. You might start with 5 minutes of intentional breathing in the morning, focusing on each inhale and exhale, or you could do a quick body scan at night, noticing areas of tension. The goal is to become aware of how your mind and body are responding to stress, joy, anxiety, or other emotions in real time. This awareness can help you catch moments when your shadow is about to surface, maybe in the form of a snappy remark or a sudden flood of anxiety, so you can respond more calmly. If you've been doing shadow work, for instance, mindfulness can alert you to emotional cues that indicate an old wound is being triggered. Rather than lashing out or shutting down, you can pause, take a breath, and choose a response aligned with the more integrated self you're striving to become. Finally, The true test of these union tools lies in their life application. How do you use the insights gained from journaling, active imagination, or creative expression when you're interacting with your boss, partner, or friends? Perhaps you've discovered a repressed fear that causes you to sabotage opportunities at work. Armed with this new understanding, you might speak up at a meeting instead of holding back, or volunteer for a project that pushes you outside your comfort zone. Or maybe you've realized your relationship issues stem from projecting certain traits onto your partner, the same ones you've been denying in yourself. By owning this projection, you can start having honest conversations that break the cycle of blame and resentment. Even small shifts, like noticing when your anxiety spikes around specific people, or recognizing the moment you start to doubt your worth, can accumulate into significant changes over time. Each choice you make that's rooted in self-awareness strengthens your commitment to living authentically rather than reacting out of habit or fear. In essence, these practical steps, journaling, active imagination, therapy, artistic expression, mindfulness, and direct application, form a holistic approach to self-ownership grounded in Jung's wisdom. They help you peel back the layers of your psyche so you can see clearly what's driving your actions and decisions. Over time, this process fosters a sense of unity between your conscious desires and the unconscious elements that shape your life behind the scenes. And while it can be challenging at times, especially when you come face to face with aspects of yourself you'd rather ignore, each step forward brings you closer to the freedom and authenticity that define true self-ownership. The goal isn't to achieve some perfect, conflict-free existence. It's to live more honestly, to make choices that reflect who you really are at your core. That might involve embracing your creativity, finding the courage to speak your truth, or simply discovering that the traits you once deemed flaws can become profound sources of strength and depth. By walking this path, you move beyond superficial self-improvement and into a genuine conversation with your entire psyche, an ongoing dialogue that, over time, transforms your relationship with yourself and the world around you. As we bring this journey to a close, let's briefly look back at the concepts we've covered and how they all connect to the theme of owning yourself. We began by discussing the persona, the face we present to the world in social situations. By becoming aware of how much we adapt to fit external expectations, we can begin to see where our true self might be getting overshadowed. Next, we explored the shadow, the parts of our personality that we hide or deny, often because they don't align with what we believe is acceptable. Recognizing these hidden traits can be a powerful step towards self-acceptance and authenticity. From there, we moved on to the anima and animus, reminding us that each of us carries both masculine and feminine energies that can enrich our emotional, creative, and psychological life when balanced. Then came the collective unconscious, where universal symbols and archetypes like the hero and the mother reside. These patterns connect us to something greater than our individual stories, influencing our choices and guiding the dreams we experience at night. Finally, we looked at the transformative process of individuation, in which we strive to integrate all these aspects of our psyche, conscious and unconscious, light and dark, into a more unified self. Along the way, we touched on the importance of dream work, which can serve as a direct line to our inner world, offering clues about what remains unaddressed in our conscious life. None of these concepts will automatically transform your life without consistent practice and introspection. As you begin noticing your persona in daily interactions or journaling about your shadow triggers, you'll start to see patterns you might not have caught before. It's through these little aha moments, like recognizing a repeated theme in your dreams or realizing you've been projecting certain traits onto someone else, that real growth takes root. The path to self-ownership isn't a quick fix. It's a winding road that requires patience, courage, and willingness to face discomfort. Yet every step you take can be deeply rewarding because it brings you closer to a state of wholeness, where you're living from a place of genuine self-knowledge rather than societal scripts or hidden fears. It's also important to acknowledge that this work can feel overwhelming at times, especially if you're confronting old traumas, painful emotions, or core beliefs you never thought to question. If you find yourself in a place where it feels like too much to handle on your own, don't hesitate to seek professional help. A Jungian analyst, a depth psychologist, or even a well-trained therapist who's open to exploring unconscious content can be an invaluable ally. Group workshops or retreats focusing on archetypal exploration can also provide a supportive community where you learn from others walking a similar path. Remember that needing help doesn't mean you're weak. It signifies that you're serious about your growth and willing to invest in the processes that lead to real transformation. If you're feeling motivated to delve deeper, there are several immediate ways to continue this exploration. You might start by keeping a dream journal so you can map out recurring symbols or emotional themes. You could also begin or resume therapy, whether one-on-one or in a group setting, especially if you suspect certain shadow aspects are causing ongoing conflict in your relationships or work life. Another powerful step is to read one of Jung's primary texts, such as Memories, Dreams, Reflections, or Modern Man in Search of a Soul, to gain deeper insight into his theories and see how they might resonate with your experiences. If reading Jung directly feels daunting, there are plenty of introductions, commentaries, and guided journals designed to make his ideas more accessible. I want to leave you with one of Jung's most famous quotes: "Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes." This line encapsulates the spirit of everything we've discussed. While it's natural to seek validation, answers, or inspiration from the external world, genuine self-ownership begins when we turn inward and acknowledge the complexity of our own minds. In doing so, we awaken to the parts of ourselves we may have been ignoring, gaining clarity, resilience, and a sense of purpose that doesn't rely on external approval. This process is a lifelong, liberating pursuit because true wholeness can't be rushed. It unfolds as we continually engage with our dreams, our self-reflection, and our relationships in more mindful, empathetic ways. By recognizing the persona we wear, the shadow we hide, the archetypes that shape us, and the deep wells of creativity that reside in our unconscious, we begin to write our own story rather than passively following someone else's script. May this exploration inspire you to look deeper, question more boldly, and discover the transformative power of truly owning yourself.